All right, we're going to call to order the regular meeting of the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority for May 23rd. We're going to begin, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests and to join council and staff in the pledge, which tonight's going to be led by Petrea Marchand.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the East Riverfront property in negotiations with the California Department of Parks and Recreation. No action was taken. And to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with the Police Officers Association, the Police Managers Association, Specialists and Professionals Group, Confidential Group, and Firefighter Association Local 522. No action was taken. So with that, we're going to proceed to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, the council is prohibited by state law from taking action on items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other agenda item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that is just behind Mr. Martin near the front door and turn it in, thank you, Tom, and turn it into the clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard. And to that end, we ask that all the comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that simply indicates which agenda item is currently being considered. We take the yellow request cards all the way up to the completion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the council questions or discussion or the public testimony have begun, we don't take any additional speaking cards after that. So if you're here for a particular item, please be sure to get the card in before the end of the staff report. We also recognize that for some folks, speaking in public isn't exactly their favorite thing and can cause anxiety. So we do ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or actually any other applause or demonstrations, and we try to maintain some civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have a couple of requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Tom Martin.
Chris, how you been? Long time no see, what, a couple of weeks? Anyway, I got a couple of complaints, bitches, arguments, whatever you wish to call them. Anyway, you got these yellow things on Park Boulevard. I guess they're for your bicycles. Cars are parking them because they don't know what the hell those things are. I didn't know what they were. So you got these bicycle parking areas, but I don't see one three-wheel bicycle or one electric bicycle that I can ride. These guys aren't ADA compliant, those two-wheelers. I think you ought to get a fleet of three-wheel bicycles, so fat guys like me can ride them. That's simple. Ballpark, I'll leave that alone for now. The other one was already, you guys want to get into the 900? Great, but you guys don't deserve that kind of money. Anyway, I'll sit down and shut up. Chris, you're looking good.
You too, Tom. Thanks so much. And Pat Flint.
Sounds like the motor needs to be replaced. Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm here to speak to our PRA request that I turned into the city on April the 10th. The city has been very responsive, I will say that. I've received maybe 4 pieces of information that I've requested, and this all has to do with the RD 900-537 issue. I have not received I was told this is the largest request you've ever had, and that there are a lot of documents. So as far as I'm concerned, this item should not appear on this agenda until you've met all requirements of the PRA request that I made. And to date, I've only received a few documents. The Guide to Public Record Act, revised version 2017, responding to public records request, page 17, This right of access to public information imposes a duty on local agencies to respond to PRA requests and does not permit an agency to delay or obstruct the inspection or copying of public records, even if there is some doubt as to what I requested. Mr. Mayor, you know I'm getting real tired of the games you're playing. I consider this an obstruction of my right to public records because of the delay that's made. And I'm addressing this to you because I know staff takes direction directly from you. I ask that item 20 regarding the RD 900 and 537 districts be removed from the agenda and not be brought back, that the RD 900 and the RD 537 remain as they are or consolidate themselves. This is a money grab. It's stated in the agenda item, funding under governance factor. MSR recommended options that funding is dedicated, i.e., or example, ability to transfer, borrow between accounts, not in the best interest of the public welfare, which you stated was one of the things that you were going to do. So with that being said, Mr. Mayor, I would like to see you gone within the next week because, number one, your spy game that I was way over my head, your cyberspace stuff, is an invasion of privacy. So I thank you very much and hope that you take my request to heart.
All right, and Danny Langford?
Good evening. Looking at the new contract for the city manager position, I have questions as to how and why the city manager is an employee of the mayor only. Shouldn't his contract be between the entire city council versus just the mayor? I'm just curious. The Memorial Park issues. At the last council meeting, the city staffer that presented the budget issues said that Memorial Park is over $300,000 already over budget. I know that $1 million was set aside for that project, and being that nothing has come back to any meetings that I've seen in public, how is it over budget that much already? Maybe we shouldn't have hired a consultant for $220,000 then? Just saying. Last but not least, the RD 900 issue, I have some huge concerns as well. From a recent public records request, I have a copy of the letter that was sent from RD 900 to the city dated April 18th. It says, at the April 11th and 12th regular meeting scheduled of the Board of Trustees of the Reclamation District 900 and 537, the trustees unanimously voted to initiate talks with the City of West Sacramento council members in a form of 3x2 or 2x2 meetings. The trustees of both reclamation districts respectfully request the city staff be directed to agendize this topic at City Council's next regularly scheduled meeting. At 2 meetings ago, I heard Councilmember Sandine request that this meeting happen between the reclamation district and the council. Why hasn't this happened yet when you have it on the agenda tonight? I respectfully request that item number 20 on this item be pulled until this meeting happens. How can you fairly make this decision without having that meeting with them? That makes no sense. And it is a hostile takeover. Bill Christoph's letter that I read into record and handed each one of you that was left out of the agenda packet in March when this issue came about to hire the consultant on this issue, that speaks volumes. And you, Mr. Johannesson, even said, why are we fixing something that's not broken? So I respectfully request that you pull this item until that meeting can happen between the Reclamation District and the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to proceed now to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there any reports or other communications? Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Riverfront Joint Powers Authority Board and Policy Steering Committee met on May 15th. The significant items in that meeting were they appointed a 5th director of the Joint Powers Authority Board, which is David Taylor. They also gave the JPA executive signature authority over $250,000. And then the authority was $100,000 for construction only prior to this motion, and after that, it's raised to $250,000. The other reports we received were the FTA risk review, which is going to start happening. And in a part of that, we had a discussion, we ended up approving the governance structure, and the approving Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma was at the meeting as well. But the discussion, at least what I felt was focused on whether or not to approve that governance structure at that meeting or defer it to some point, was during this FTA risk review, they assessed risk points for the lack of a governance structure in place. And I think the feeling was that rather than try to, and the increase of risk points actually increases cost of the project. So rather than try to avoid that, to try to go ahead and have the governance structure approved now, there's probably going to be some comments on the governance structure anyway as the process moves forward, so there's going to be times to amend that. But in the end, the board approved the governance structure. And outside of that, it looks like the station options are going to be presented to the group on June 19th on design, and the vehicles, it looks like there's going to be a July approval date for that.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Johannesson. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 14th, that's right, we had a meeting of the Yolo County Transportation District in Woodland, and the one item that was of consequence was just the introduction of the preliminary budget for 18-19 for Transit District. There's, with ridership still on a decline and revenues, I should say expenses still pretty much the same. The board is getting ready to make some choices. I know staff, I want to thank our staff for working with Transit District on their first kind of draft of it. I think there's more work to be done there, but it's a really kind of critical year looking at this year's budget because of the fixed route costs. We did also approve the final contract for the fixed route paratransit operations with TransDev. It was timely because they were there themselves to hear the budget discussions. And again, it's just another sign of how transit needs are changing and how adaptable with the new contract we got with TransDev can adapt to that. There was a lot of discussion around that, their ability to sort of fill in gaps or work with our fixed route schedules to kind of keep costs down, to kind of maintain a good budget, a solid balanced budget in years to come. So there'll be more on that in the next month's meeting, June, and that's all I have to report today.
Great. Councilmember Roscoe.
Test. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City School 2x2, myself, the mayor, and the president of the Washington Unified School District met for the City School 2x2. We received an update on the Sycamore Trail as well as Westmore Oaks and the charter school draft recreational area plans. And there was some brief discussion that was brought forth by the president of the Washington Unified School District regarding a youth boxing camp. I provided information and guidance that I had collected after several months of researching the possibility of a boxing camp here in West Sacramento, along with Supervisor Oscar Villegas, and provided that information to her for the possibility of creating a program for local youth who would be interested in participating in such activities. Other than that, no other actions were taken. River City Stadium Finance Authority, we received a presentation by Jeff Savage of the River Cats on the status of stadium operations and the business plan, as well as had approval of the budget for municipal administration expenses for fiscal years 18 and 19. And finally, Regional County Sanitation District Board met this morning. We also approved the Regional County Sanitation Districts and Finance Authority final budgets for the fiscal year 18 and 19 and received district engineer administrative updates. Thank you.
Thank you. The SACOG board met and took up a couple of items. Probably the biggest controversy at the board was on the allocation of funds for the next round of transportation programming. And it's hard to cut to the chase on this because it's fairly complicated, but each funding round cycle, well, the city manager, having been the director of SACOG, knows this, but each funding round cycle is a period in which we try to project forward from the state and federal government in particular, but also development impact fees and all other sources of funding. For the next, our finance director is also quite familiar with this. Over the next 4 or 5 years, what money do we expect to come in from grants and appropriations? What color of money? What can it be used for? What have you? And then we try to program that in advance. So it's not every year. We don't just wait to see what's coming in each year and then spend that money because transportation projects typically require more advanced planning than that. But it's an arbitrary number to choose. We're going to program the money that we expect to see between 2018 and 2021, or 2022, or 2019. There's no law that requires us to pick a particular date. So we've got a set of programs. West Sacramento has been highly competitive in virtually all of those programs, from the community design program. Probably the most visible accomplishment of that program here has been the entire downtown streetscape project, but also the bike and pedestrian program, the regional program that's funded a bunch of our projects, and many, many others. So the issue before SACOG was how much of the expected funds over that 4 to 5 year period should be programmed now. So in the funding round that is about to open, we have this debate pretty much every 4 to 5 years around this question of do you spend every dollar that you expect over the next 4 to 5 years? Not spend, I'm sorry. Do you allocate every dollar that you expect to get over the next 4 or 5 years in this year, or do you reserve some for later? I'm pretty traditionally an advocate for reserving some for later because we don't know everything that is going to be needed or the conditions between now and 5 years from now. If we had programmed all of our money today in the city, for example, 5 years ago, we'd be in a world of hurt. A lot of things have changed. And this was also the message from the regional elected officials forum that SACOG hosted with Valley Vision as well. The message from the Greater Sacramento Economic Council was we need to do a better job of being nimble with our transportation funding to align with what our economic priorities are, but also what economic opportunities are. So there was a large debate that turned out, I think incorrectly, to be between some of the smaller rural cities and counties in the region and the big cities, which includes us erroneously, but that's kind of how the rural towns see the region. And so they preferred that we spend all the money now because they're like, well, we have projects. We have, I would like to do this bike path in rural Yolo County, and so as long as we have viable projects, we should program all the money now. So that's the debate every single time. When we do it that way, we tend to lose because we have larger projects that require many years to do and that are highly competitive, but that don't work if you can only fund $1 at a time each year. So in the end, the board voted about a 2/3 vote. It's complicated given SACOG's voting structure, but voted by about a 2/3 vote to reserve a larger portion for later. And by later, we mean next year. We'll still be allocating it again, but to try to be able to keep pace with changes in the development climate and in the transportation technology climate in particular that are occurring as well. So it won't affect the amount of money that we are eligible for in this current cycle, but it's an important policy issue that the region consistently faces about how to be resilient, how to be adaptive especially in this sector, especially for changing technologies with automated vehicles and other things coming more than likely within the next 5 years. Allocating all the funds for today's transportation environment didn't make a lot of sense. So it's still 80%, but it's an important reservation. So we took that item, and that was probably the biggest item of the board meeting. We also had a fairly extensive workshop on pricing. New approaches, partly incentivized by air quality and climate change issues, partly by consistently reducing revenue from the gas tax because people are driving less, and so it's not a viable permanent solution for financing transportation. So what is? And as early as a decade ago, the region had been discussing potentially becoming a pilot for road-based pricing or vehicle miles pricing or other kinds of approaches. That's squarely within the authority of the Transportation Committee, which I chair, but making the leap to something like that is a pretty enormous social, economic, and cultural change in a community. So we focused this last meeting principally on tollways, tollable high occupancy vehicle lanes, those sorts of things, which principally exist in Southern California, primarily in Orange County and San Diego County. So we were digging into, okay, how do those work? How does the financing actually happen? Do they get over congested? Do they actually pay for themselves? Those sorts of issues. So I can share the background materials with the council after the meeting from that session. But there are at least some examples in the state and elsewhere that are promising as potential pilots. Maybe not here, who knows, but certainly within the broader region. On the same day, the Board of Directors for the Central Valley Regional Service Authority for Freeways and Expressways, the CV SAFE, met. And this is the call box authority, essentially, for the 6-county region plus San Joaquin. And I've reported intermittently that we have been working to reduce the number of call boxes over time. As the share of the population and drivers that have cell phones, for example, increases, but also because we've been diverting money that we would have spent on call boxes to the high-frequency freeway service patrol. This also started under Mr. Tuttle's leadership at SACOG, so that rather than we know that there's likely to be a motorist stranded in the urban areas. Pretty much at any one moment, there's going to be one. So let's just keep running the tow truck essentially consistently on the major freeways and expressways in the region, and that turns out to be more cost effective than maintaining a bunch of call boxes that virtually nobody uses. So we've been in that trajectory. We got word that Verizon is discontinuing its 3G service entirely, and the Verizon 3G service is the backbone for the existing call box infrastructure, and they're discontinuing that service as of December 31st of 2019. So as of January 1st, 2020, the call boxes will not work any longer. And so we're at an inflection point of deciding, okay, what are we going to do now? Do we retrofit all of them for 4G or 5G or for some other technology, or do we take the opportunity to retrench call boxes even more and invest more in things like the Freeway Service Patrol? The compromise at the board was to allow each of the cities and counties to make its own judgment, at least for now. And it's almost certainly the case that in Sacramento City and West Sacramento and Rancho Cordova, for example, that simply removing the call boxes is the more cost-effective approach, because the usage of those are I want to say on general, it's generally like one call a month. So rather than replacing them with 5G technology, it's much more cost-effective to simply run the Freeway Service Patrol a little bit more. Whereas in El Dorado and some other places, that may not be the case. The one exception is that we would be maintaining the call boxes and retrofitting the call boxes on the bicycle paths and equestrian trails. Those actually do get a fair amount of usage. So those turn out to be cost-effective in terms of dealing with folks who are stranded from emergencies. So that was it from that board. Yesterday, the council knows the city of West Sacramento, the city of San Francisco, and the city of San Leandro are the three founding cities of the Startup in Residence program, which is the program where we incubate inside City Hall a startup that's working in the civic technology space, trying to solve problems that our citizens or city government has. That's the program through which we incubated Appledore, and it's the development of its outreach grid app that optimizes information sharing and mapping and other information between police officers, social workers, the homeless coordinator and others in the space of homelessness and homeless encampments in particular. So that was our first project. We've been working on a project this last year, which has not to this point been as successful, but that's what the point of the startup program is to test. And sometimes when you test, you don't always succeed. But yesterday was the presentation of this year's projects. And the deputy city manager, John Robinson, and I both went to San Francisco for the presentation, along with to announce the new platform, which is called GovRock, and it builds off of the work that came from the Age-Friendly Task Force that was convened as part of our work through AARP's Livable Communities program, in which we found, maybe to our surprise, maybe not, but we found that one of the most important needs and/or desires of seniors in our community was connecting to meaningful volunteer opportunities where they can contribute, use their skills for community betterment, and also simply connect with other people in meaningful ways. This was a very high priority in the community-wide surveys and workshops. And so the city manager and his team selected this, what's the name of the company? Do you remember? Help Emerge was the startup that was selected to be incubated here in City Hall because they had already done work in helping connect folks to volunteer in case of emergencies. But this was a project to extend their work to day-to-day volunteering, not simply in the case of a fire or an earthquake or what have you. So GovRock is that platform to help make it easier to connect with volunteer opportunities that exist in the community, because it matters a lot in terms of well-being and for health, but also for community improvement, and as a very important form of civic engagement. When people are really rolling up their sleeves and doing things, it's a very strong marker of what matters to them and what their values are and what they're passionate about and what they care about improving in the city. So it's an important leap in the civic engagement space. The basic idea is right now it's hard, either it's hard to find the right opportunities to volunteer in the community, or you're drowning in them. If you put an ad out saying I'm willing to volunteer, then there's 10,000 people that want you to volunteer. So it's it's either feast or famine. So part of the purpose of the app is to make it easier for folks of all ages. This is not limited to seniors alone, but of all ages, to be able to find the right match in terms of volunteering opportunities in this city. So it was very well received at the event, and kudos to Mr. Robinson and Mr. Tuttle and the city team for their work in advancing this, and certainly to Mr. Johannesson and Ms. Sandine for leading the age-friendly task force work that led to that point. So coincidentally, at the same time, we were named one of the 21 smart cities to watch in 2018, which is pretty remarkable. The other ones were Amsterdam, Austin, Portland, Toronto, and a few others. And then farther down the list was West Sacramento. So it's an example of the use of the smart cities technology that was part of Measure E to advance some of our key community objectives, including being an age-friendly city. So. Let's see, just two others in this space. Last week we did the Kinders Go to College program. Just want to acknowledge the police and fire and parks. I'm probably missing a department. I don't know if Public Works was there, but for contributing to a really terrific event where it's the first day of college for kindergartners in the community, where they come to City College across the street. It was an opportunity for us to share with them not just the first day of college, but also everything that is now ahead of them as a result of the West Sacramento Promise. It's always very inspiring to see the collaboration between between the college and the school district and the city and our other partners, but also to see a lot of excited young children ready for college already. And then last today we were featured as part of the regional seminar on employment and financial empowerment for working age adults. So West Sacramento has been leading the region in strategies around economic opportunity and education for young people. But in terms of building a strong workforce, achieving social equity and inclusion, the kids are not coming to save us. I mean, the current generation of young people is smaller than the last generations of young people. So we can't simply educate young people out of our problem of lack of economic opportunity. So this seminar was about strategies for upskilling working adults, and also working adults in sectors like truck driving that are severely threatened by automation and other changes in the market. And so the work that West Sacramento's been doing on digital badges for young people as part of the STEPS program and the Home Run was featured as a promising way to deal with adults as well. So that was heartwarming. It was an opportunity to reinforce that. I think, as the council all knows, for the first time in the history of West Sacramento, our unemployment rate is now lower than the rest of the county, and it's now lower than the rest of the region, and it's now lower than the rest of the state of California, and that's never happened in the history of the city. Everybody's unemployment rate's down, but ours has plummeted from over 14% to under 4% in a very short time, and it's the result of a lot of things, but it should be a source of community pride, and it's certainly a source of resilience and reducing inequality in the community. So, good couple of days. All right, if there are no other communications, item 1C is appointments. I'd like to make 2 tonight. The first is to the Planning Commission. I'd like to appoint Robert Chase. Mr. Chase was a member of the Planning Commission previously. I think Mr. Ledesma has served with him. So I'd like to, what's that?
I think he was their appointment.
Oh, yeah. So I'd like to appoint Robert Chase to the Planning Commission and ask if there's a motion to.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Chase, in addition to being a former planning commissioner, is also the former state architect of California, so it's we got some muscle in our community, so it's really great. It'd be fantastic. And then the second is, as the council knows, the redevelopment successor agency oversight board that existed for the city has been consolidated with all the other redevelopment successor agency oversight boards in the county. So now there's a single consolidated, Yolo County Consolidated Redevelopment Oversight Board, and Mr. Ledesma has been appointed as the representative of the 4 cities to that board. And the responsibility for appointing a employee member of that board falls to the largest former the successor agency of whom its former redevelopment agency was the employer of the largest number of employees of any redevelopment agency in Yolo County, which is us. And so I would like to appoint Erin Rivas, who has been the member of the West Sacramento Redevelopment Oversight Successor Board, but appoint her to the Yolo County Consolidated Redevelopment Oversight Board, representing the employees of all of the redevelopment agencies throughout Yolo County.
I'll move that recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That carries. Thank you very much. That then brings us to presentations, which is item 2, presentation of a certificate from AARP acknowledging the acceptance of the city's age-friendly action plan. Mr. Robinson.
Good evening. As part of its commitment to making the city of West Sacramento more livable for all of its residents, the city council joined the city into the AARP network of age-friendly communities in 2015. And one of the key responsibilities as a member of that network is the preparation of an age-friendly action plan. And the city immediately went to work on the development of that plan under the leadership of an age-friendly advisory committee that was co-chaired by Councilmembers Sandeen and Johannesson. And after a period of substantial, work on the part of AARP and staff and many of the wonderful AARP volunteers that are in the room tonight, as well as innumerable community members who participated in the multiple events that we held, we did get a plan put together that the council approved in September of 2017. And at that point, the plan was subjected to a review by AARP to make sure that it met all of the requirements that AARP has laid out for those plans. And our plan was found to be very good, and they've approved it, and they have a certificate that they'd like to present to the city council. AARP does, and Julie Bates from AARP is here to present that.
All right, and as she's coming up, I understand that West Sacramento is the first in California.
Not sure if you're the first to move to implementation, but you certainly were the first.
Okay, all right.
That worked. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Julie Bates, and I'm with AARP, and I'm really excited to be here this evening to present to you your certificate that moves you from planning to implementation. And as John mentioned, this was a long process, and there was an advisory committee, chaired by Councilmember Johannesson and Sandeen, and we had volunteers who live in the city of West Sacramento and have been working on this effort, and we worked with John in order to bring this all together. And what's been wonderful to see is your plan not only was good, it's great. And we are using it as an example for other cities to look at, to strive to do. So your plan not only was approved by my partners in Washington, D.C., it really is being held up as an example. So I wanted to thank you for your commitment to the network of age-friendly communities and your efforts that you spend spreading the word to other mayors across the country and why this is important. And we appreciate the council's commitment to this process, because just because you've planned and you've made a beautiful plan, you're now in the process of implementation. And so this is just recognizing that your plan was accepted by AARP and the World Health Organization as part of your process.
Great. All right. Should we go accept it, Mark?
Come down and take a picture is what I've been told to do. And if I could have the volunteers join us, is that possible? Come on. You did the work. Fine. I can't force my volunteers, but without the volunteers, this work would not have been done. I could not have been at all the different places that they were at, so. Charlotte? Helen? Come on.
Which side?
They're never shy. You go on that side. And Charlotte, you stand next to me, and I'll stand next to the mayor. How's that?
Okay. All right, guys, get situated real quick. Okay, look over at me. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, and 3. Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys. Really good sitting down.
Thanks.
So let me just say before you go, how much this means to us. We were one of the first cities in California to leap into this, into the age-friendly network. I think San Francisco and West Sacramento were the first two to join. No, I think San Francisco joined first, we joined second, but we actually completed the work first. And it was because of the work of our staff and the various commissioners from all of the commissions in the city that served on the Age-Friendly Task Force, plus the AARP and community volunteers, plus the two co-chairs who would not let this project be anything but a great success. And I'm glad you've given us the green light to start implementation, because as you already heard, we weren't waiting. So in terms of the volunteerism, we've been working on that for a while. And we had a meeting of the AARP Livable Communities Action Team. I guess I represent all the cities in California on the AARP's planning group for that, and we had that meeting last week. And we had just launched the new point-to-point rideshare service, West Sacramento On Demand, with VIA, just 2 days earlier. And it was an epiphany in that meeting for folks to see at least what we are attempting to accomplish with the pilot. It's a pilot. We'll see how it works. But the notion that we could provide essentially at almost the cost of a public transit trip that might take as much as an hour or more on somebody else's schedule, that provide the complete mobility to go where you want to, whenever you want to, as long as it's in West Sacramento, and have a Mercedes pick you up within 5 to 8 minutes. Within a block of where you live or where you're going from, and take you to within a block of where you're going for $1.75 is an enormous leap forward. And I think the work of the task force and our partnership with AARP and the clarion call from the volunteers and other community members who spoke up all throughout that process about what are really the key priorities. in the community in order to enrich our lives as all of us are aging. And this definitely, both of these two topics, mobility, transportation, and volunteerism, rose very high. And it's just very heartwarming to see both the staff and the community and partners rally together to deliver in such a big way, really, on both of them. We'll see on the volunteer one that we're just launching that now, but the West Sacramento On Demand service is already being closely watched throughout the country as a potential model. And so, thanks so much for the inspiration, certainly to Mr. Johannesson for not just leading the task force, but ensuring that the work of the task force is getting implemented, and that we're seeing everything that we do as an opportunity to advance the age-friendly plan. So, thank you. All right, with that then, we have the consent agenda, which is items 3 through 14. Are there any items for separate question or comment or to remove from the consent calendar? 4?
13.
What are you doing? Do you have any? Okay, all right, and I have 3, and we have a request for public comment on 9. All right, so item 3 is consideration of resolution 18-31, amending the boundary of residential parking permit area B. Paul? I was originally going to pull this for a full staff report on it. I don't fully understand exactly some of the details of what it is we're doing. Maybe I can just ask you them directly. So in this is a proposal to expand the existing permit parking area that we created in the Washington district, that we created for the purpose of I'm trying to remember if this one was in response to Raleigh Field or to Metro Place at Washington Square. I think it might have been both, actually.
Mayor, all of the above. Various amendments have occurred over the years related to the Ziggurat Building, Raleigh Field, development in the Bridge District. This amendment has to deal with a change in use from a commercial property to residential, and including that property within the boundaries of the district, so the residents there would be able to get permits.
Yeah, so this is the one that I have a policy objection to, because the purpose of these overlays is it was and is to protect existing residents who are affected by, who live in a neighborhood, and then we change the land use somewhere nearby, and it creates some parking pressure. Raleigh Field being a good example. So, I live in the Washington district, and suddenly, thank you very much, City. I love going to River Cats games, but now there's the stadium 2 blocks away, and there's a huge amount of parking demand in my neighborhood. We said, okay, our job is, we're here to protect existing places, so we're creating this overlay. We did the same thing for the high school, and we did the same thing, I guess, for Metro Place at Washington Square. But it's for the existing residents. Now, we have had a lot of debate over the last year or two, kind of post hoc, after development projects, about giving access to brand-new residents, folks who are moving into a brand-new development project, those same privileges, essentially, to compete against others for parking. And that's not the purpose of this. And so this purpose is to protect folks who are already living here who are inadvertently affected, not folks who are looking and say, I'm going to buy or rent this brand-new place, and therefore have permit parking. Because that reduces the amount of parking that's available to the general public, including the general public that already lives here. And if there is a demand for that level of parking, which I know we've had debates about that with specific projects, it should be the project should be building parking for its residents, not consuming the public parking spaces. So that's what I'm trying to understand about this. It wasn't clear to me whether or not, like when we did Capitol Yards, we didn't issue parking permits to the residents of Capitol Yards. The purpose of the Capitol Yards related residential permit parking was to protect people against the parking impacts of Capitol Yards. This is the opposite. It consumes public spaces for the general public and makes them permit parking for folks that don't even live here yet. So am I getting the mechanics wrong at least?
I understand what you're saying. David Tilley may be able to come up and speak to the Planning Commission's consideration from the standpoint of the policy. The structure itself cannot accommodate on-site parking, and to the extent that they're reusing the existing building, it's not a blank slate, and there just isn't the ability to create, let's say, a parking podium to serve the project. And so even with certain reductions in the parking requirement under the Washington specific plan, they still had a need for some on-street parking. And so I'll let David speak to the Planning Commission's recommendation and how the council's decision to either not support that, to support or not support that affects the project.
Okay. Mr. Tilley.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We were at the Planning Commission on the reuse project of the 301 D Street building, which is the one just south of the railroad tracks. It's been largely unused for seemingly a long time based on the cobwebs in there. There is a row of 30-something existing striped spaces along the north side of D Street adjacent to the railroad tracks, essentially right in front of this building. So Planning Commission considered this. They made their approval contingent upon including some version of those spaces into the permit program at a future date, should that project actually happen and go forward. And we also have other things going on in that neighborhood we wanted to consider, like La Crosta will be opening soon. Hopefully Bean and Barrel will get re-tenanted. Sal's is for sales, we understand. So there's a lot happening right on that, with that one block or so of C Street. So we had recommended that this area at least be included in the permit program boundaries for now, and then we can sort out who's eligible for permits, as we get closer to that project being built, which they've estimated it would be about a 12 to 18-month schedule to actually construct. So we have some time, but since their project approval was contingent upon this potential action from the council, that's why we're here tonight with this item.
And did staff represent that this would be a ministerial action to get this approved, or,
Well, it is.
The project itself didn't come to us, right? So the Planning Commission's made a commitment that we would
Well,
make
their
this change?
approval was contingent upon this action, and if the council does not take this action, tonight or at some point in the near future, then we will have to return to the Planning Commission and explore other solutions for that particular project.
And is it and are we dealing with the issue of the city's parking requirements, or are we dealing with what the project developer says that they need in terms of parking spaces? Or
No,
is it the
these
Planning
are-
Commission's own judgment?
No, these would be meeting our own requirements.
Okay. Because this is currently not a permitted stretch of space. And so my concern is actually exactly what you said, which is that the need for parking for Devil May Care and La Crosta and the guitar shop and Ray's barbershop and all of that is going to grow. And so removing a block from what is removing a block at which no one currently lives from the availability of on-street public parking spaces into the future seems like the wrong direction to be going. We need to have more spaces that are not that. I recognize today the use is different, but into the future, if there's a space if there's a block today that can be available for more general parking, the impact on the rest of the neighborhood will be reduced. Because we are already short on parking in that neighborhood, and adding this into the residential zone and then issuing permits to the brand new folks that can make a choice right now whether when they move in. I'm moving in. I'm going to pay less because there's no on street. There's no parking in the building, but we're going to be subsidizing them and removing potential parking that could be available for the general public to be able to patronize exactly those same businesses.
Well, yeah, I think partially why we would ask that if you do make this action tonight, that we would not implement it immediately, is so that we can be looking at these things a little more comprehensively in that area, given the dynamic changes that are occurring along that, that block and a half. But we're trying to satisfy where the Planning Commission was at. But if the council is not inclined to take this or move this forward tonight, then we'll return to the Planning Commission on that project and look for other options.
I mean, the only other thing I'd say about it is that for the general public, for the folks who already live here, essentially, that if we build a new condo or new apartments or what have you, the cost of parking a parking space is significant.
Yes.
Right. So, and what we have seen in some pioneering projects is that we have allowed for limited use of public spaces in order to help those projects pencil. That is not a long-term strategy. It's not even a midterm strategy. We need if as somebody moving into a brand-new condo at 3rd and D, I want to have a parking space, then I should be paying, as the buyer of that condo, for the cost of constructing that parking space. I shouldn't be consuming a parking space that the people of the Washington neighborhood or Margaret McDowell 150 years ago, the parking space that they made, and having my ability to park subsidized. So I know the Planning Commission, which is still continues to be principally folks that aren't in the urban core, have an idea about what an elevated parking requirement should be. But they seem to not get that in this case that there's a cost to that, and having the public subsidize it by giving up these spaces, to me, doesn't seem like an equitable solution. And if we control either the project approval or what the minimum parking requirement is, to me, I'd rather go back at that than take an action like this. But I've talked enough. So, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Yeah, thank you. David, on the project, how did it originally come to us? What were they proposing originally on the highway of parking?
Well, this partially only reason why we entertained this notion is that it is a reuse of that building rather than, building a whole new building, from scratch on a vacant lot. I don't think we would be recommending this as we are if we weren't talking about a reuse. But it has always been a multifamily project, approximately 40 units, where they're going to substantially reuse that existing building. And so it does have a small parking lot on the west side of roughly a dozen spaces. So they've squeezed all the spaces in that they can. They're providing secure bike parking, and they're also following some of the stuff we put in the municipal code last few years about including car sharing space in there where we grant some further reductions. So we've tried to squeeze as much out of this existing site as possible to try to minimize the demand on street.
So when they came to the Planning Commission, whatever parking plan they had with that and on-street parking, they were comfortable with.
That's why we went to the Planning Commission, was for this particular issue.
Right, so this is really a Planning Commission who's deeming there's not enough parking where the applicant.
Well, certainly on site, there's about a dozen spaces. Most folks would probably agree that's probably too few for 40 units. But there is this resource that happens to be right across the street that thus far at least appears to be, lightly used, at least present day at least. So we did take this to the Planning Commission. The specific plan provides for a process for which the Planning Commission can approve some alternatives. But there's, on site, there isn't going to be a space for additional parking beyond what's there.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay. But then you would issue up to 40 or 50 or 100 permits to this project?
Well, they're short 17 based on where the Planning Commission was at and where all the math we've done for our municipal code. So would not be proposing to issue permits to everyone there. This is partially why we want to delay implementation of this, because we want to make sure this project is really going to happen. We're confident that it will be, but it's certainly going to be probably at least another year before it's substantially under construction. And then by then we'll understand more about how 3rd Street is going and the businesses over there and what parking demand really is for non-residential visitors to that district. So all we're asking is that this area just be included within those boundaries at this time.
Yeah, that's all, but I personally, I don't see no reason why D Street should not be, that segment of D Street should not be available for folks to go to Devil May Care and Burgers and everything else in that area that we expect to be as the properties across the street on Third Street develop, including the project that we're working on in terms of remediation and what have you, the demand for parking, someday, I'm sure someone will tell us, someday where there'll be a parking structure, and then the day after that, there'll be automated vehicles, and there won't be any need for parking at all. But in between now and then, there's going to be parking demand. There already is excess parking demand, and so to remove the potential of that from that side for folks that when they buy one of these units, they can know here's what you get. It's there's 12 spaces available, and as the developer, I'm charging the premium for these spaces. And if you don't have a parking space inside the building, then you have a lower rent or purchase price. But to use to me, the needs of the community around here trump the project's residents that aren't here yet getting a special subsidy from the public realm.
Mayor, could I just add, should the council consider the action, and I don't think you are, I just point out that in the past, the council has limited the number of permits to be 2 per residence and 2 visitor placards. And so we haven't put any type of restrictions in there. They'd be able to park, they'd be able to be issued 4 per unit.
How many units?
And they could park anywhere within the B permit area. And then the other thing I'd point out is that generally what you see throughout the B permit area is time-restricted parking of 2 hours between, let's say, 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And so in areas where you have both, the B permit just allows you to be exempt from those time limits. And so the area would be signed as both time-restricted and a B permit zone if it were to be approved.
Well, at a minimum, I'd like to remove this from the consent agenda and take it, because I don't think I could support it. So I at least need the ability to not vote for it. So it needs, we'll remove it from consent unless there's any objection to that. We'll return to it after the consent agenda. So, thanks. Totally get what you're trying to do. I'm not convinced in terms of the sacrifice of the public realm for a private project. Okay, item 4 is consideration of approval of the advanced metering infrastructure agreement with Census USA Incorporated for the citywide water meter conversion project. Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you. So my questions are really just, so this looks like it's a software as a service agreement, essentially.
Yes, upgrade.
The amount is $231,000 for a 5-year contract.
That's correct.
And it also requires the city to purchase the reading instruments. It doesn't include any IT at all, so it's really just that specific application.
Yes, just the application and the support. And our IT will not be totally involved, just the software installation and coordination. And they will provide all the services, just like they're doing right now.
Okay. And this is because the last software purchase was less than 5 years ago and it's obsolete now?
Well, actually, we had that quite a few years ago, but 2012 is another upgrade, was the most recent upgrade. And right now, because we only had 7,000 maximum endpoint reading, in which we're converting all customers to all meter reading, we require probably up to, right now, the upgraded version will give us about 17,000 capacity for of the end reading points.
17,000 reading
Yes.
points, so it still won't cover the entire city?
And that's why I built in a extra 10%, and we should be able to, at least for 5 years, we should be okay.
Okay. And it looks like this software is also going to provide a consumer portal?
Yes.
And is that just for that consumer's own information?
Yes, they will have a mobile app or a computer app. They can monitor every second of the water flow.
Is there any opportunity here to include this type of data in the open data system?
Yes, we will, my staff and I, we will, once we install the customer portal, we will conduct some outreach, educational to the and also city staff can use that to monitor usage.
No, I mean the city's open data site?
Oh.
Where folks can
Yes,
access that?
yes.
So will this data be available?
Yeah.
For
consumption,
citywide?
for city, consumption, yes.
Okay, so
We
for
can-
citywide, not necessarily any specific billing information, but you'll be able to, for example, if there's 17,000 meters in the city, you can get the data on how water is used throughout the year, for example?
Yes, yes. We
Okay.
can publish if we want to, by area, by any statistical.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's what I want to know, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 9, we have a request for public comment, and that item 9 is consideration of second reading and adoption of ordinance 18-8 regarding amendments to the Stone Lock Development Agreement. Pat Flint?
I just have a couple comments, and I guess a question or two. Why would the port agree to participate in a future capital and maintenance CFD related to the city's master plan? Will you share the proceeds of any fees that the park gets with the port? And precisely, we're afraid of the hostile takeover of the RD&D and 537 getting the same treatment that the port is getting when it comes to monetary or money. The city's getting paid, and you have to excuse me, this just upsets me. It's all about money, and how can we get funds from other agencies to pay for things that the city is responsible for? I still question a conflict of interest when the same people have governance over both agencies and can approve anything that monetarily benefits the other. And again, you want to govern a third agency? I just don't see this happening.
All right, and then item 13 is request for consideration of an opposed position on State Constitutional Amendment 20 by Senator Glazer. Ms. Roscoe.
Thank you. John, I don't really have any questions. I was just hoping that you could elaborate for the purposes of the community and those who are watching us from the comforts of their home as to providing the background on this issue and what's informing the staff's recommendation. I understand that this statutory amendment would detrimentally impact cities just like West Sacramento, and given what I read in the item, I think it'd be important to just give a little bit more information about that so that our listeners can understand it.
Sure. So currently, the way Bradley Burns local sales tax is calculated, the city gets a portion of the sales tax that's calculated every time someone purchases something. So the way that's calculated now, it's based on where the sale happens. So in a community like West Sacramento, where we have a lot of industrial and logistics businesses, those transactions get booked here, and we get the revenue from that, which is appropriate because it balances the impacts that the city experiences as a result of zoning land in industrial uses. And you have the trucks, and you have the environmental effects, and you have the opportunity costs for the other uses of the land that we're not doing because we have the industrial. So there's kind of a balance because the city's getting the revenues, and we're also getting the sales tax that gets booked here that helps offset those impacts. And what the bill proposes is that for transactions that happen for online sales, instead of the transactions being booked where they occur in the areas where the items are being produced and shipped from, they would be booked where the items are being shipped to. And what happens is, and this is an attempt to balance, an effect that is happening as the economy is changing and more online sales are happening, warehouses are consolidating, and there's a concern that the sales tax revenues are going to consolidate into, the relatively few cities that have the larger, industrial and warehouse uses. But it's a pretty blunt instrument that's being proposed in this legislation, because what will happen is that sales tax revenue will shift out of the cities like West Sacramento that have chosen to have a more balanced land use planning approach, and into other cities where they've specifically excluded those kinds of uses. And those will tend to be more affluent communities where there's less industrial uses, which will also tend to be communities that have fewer people of color, fewer lower income people. So there's substantial environmental equity and social equity issues when you talk about shifting revenues in that way. So the position that we're describing in the staff report is one in which the city would certainly be willing to continue in, discussions about a way to deal with the issues, that are happening in the sales tax revenue as the economy changes, but in a way that's not as detrimental to West Sacramento residents as what's proposed in that bill.
Well, what's proposed, what's the estimate as to the impact on West Sacramento?
I should probably defer to our finance director. The estimate that I've seen is between $180,000 and about $1 million. Let her elaborate.
It's a very difficult thing to estimate. We were able to look at a lot of different ways of doing this, but a lot of it depends on the definition of what's included in retail, whether business-to-business, business-to-government sales are also included in that point of destination allocation. So if you're looking at retail, like Nordstrom's, Amazon, those types of things that you typically consider retail, the estimate is around $180,000. If you're looking at all of it, it can be up to $1 million. But it's also very difficult to estimate because the way you look at that is looking at a population base versus looking at, I forget what the other piece is, but looking at a population base. And when you look at a population base, it doesn't really tell you because the type of population and how if your population is more inclined to order things online, if they've got access to credit cards, there's a lot of things that also impact that. So it's a rough number, but anywhere between $180,000 to $1 million is our estimate.
Okay. So if I'm trying to explain this to somebody in the community, essentially, we have warehouses all around West Sacramento and a lot of businesses that do online sales. And so currently, is it fair to say that we obtain the tax from those transactions because they originate here, but under passage of this bill, it would be the location where the purchase would be received? And so that would essentially be taking money away from West Sacramento and giving it to other places where they have affluent buyers or people who find it more convenient to do online sales, which essentially is a lot of people now, right?
That's correct. If you look now, the decisions people have made as far as land use zoning, allowing certain businesses into their city, those decisions would have been very, very different if this was in effect many years ago. So yes,
Sure.
you're absolutely correct.
And meanwhile, those companies still continue to operate and run trucks and have environmental impacts in West Sacramento without paying the price that we can remedy those, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've experienced that very directly with the HD supply. I mean, this was the legislation that we were one of the supporters or sponsors of a year ago to deal with the issue in opposite way. After one company, HD Supply, decided to assign their sales to another facility of theirs in Santee, and they still use our water. They still can call our police and fire departments and everything else. They still are running trucks on our roads. And yet all of their sales tax revenue is now going to Santee. So in the stroke of a pen. So it's and the amount of money that we were losing as a result of that transaction was enormous in terms of a share of our budget. So I'm glad you highlighted the issue because the consequences are very big for us. We benefit very much from being a city with a lot of business-to-business sales. That's a large proportion of our sales tax revenue is not paid by locals. Maybe a majority of the sales tax revenue is not paid by those of us that live here. But we're dependent on that revenue, and threats like this to undermine it in a significant way could be an existential threat to us. So thanks for bringing this forward, John. I know it was a bit of a challenge because Senator Glazer thought we were going to be a supporter of the bill, and we ran the numbers and said no thanks. But okay, anything else on consent? So then, with the exception of item 3, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then returning to item 3, is there any further discussion on the item?
I just have a question for staff on kind of this, if this doesn't, I think you said if this doesn't pass tonight, then it goes back to Planning Commission for this. I'm just trying to get a sense of what the path for the applicant will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so since the Planning Commission's approval from earlier this month was based on a potential council action, if the council does not move this, then Either we would need to come back with a revised proposal to you, or we would need to take the project back to the planning commission and look at other options for parking for that project. Because right now, there really isn't any ability to provide additional parking on site.
And we're currently outside the window to bring the project approval to the council, correct?
The appeal period is up on that.
Okay. Can I make just a future request? That when the planning commission takes an action that is contingent on an action of ours, that we see, that's highlighted so that we have the ability to correct it before we get in this situation.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a similar issue that's been going on, and it's not similar, but it's in terms of perceptions about parking at the West Gateway Place, Part 2 project as well. And I think we need to have some clarity that part of the reason around the streetcar project and the West Sacramento On Demand project and the bike share project to a lesser extent and all these other mobility solutions was to get closer to the point where we didn't need to be dealing with this level of expectation about parking. A year ago was very different when we were dealing with some of the issues in the Bridge District, although I didn't support those either. But now that we are actually delivering on many of the alternatives, it's time to gradually but intentionally, dial back and not dial up the amount of parking, especially parking that we're consuming that's currently available to the general public and would be lost to them essentially. So, all right, is there a motion on this item? Then, so if we don't have a motion, would you like us to continue the item or simply have the item not proceed for lack of a motion? In
Mayor,
terms of the next steps, what would be?
Staff would recommend that we defer consideration until your June 13th meeting. It will give us time to consider the council's comments and to come back with you, if possible, with an alternative. And obviously, I think that off-street parking, joint use parking may be an option somewhere in the area as an alternative to issuing B permits.
Okay, but you wouldn't be able to, if we deferred this item, it wouldn't affect the approval, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. If you brought back something different, then their approval was just contingent on this specific action, or was it contingent on a solution to parking?
This is sort of what we talked about in general, but the Planning Commission, by and large, was looking for a solution, that would work. And this was the solution that we presented, that evening, going into it, as it was clear the Planning Commission was struggling with this project a little bit, because they favored the project, but parking is admittedly tight on site. And so this was what we came up with sort of on the fly that evening, and it got the Planning Commission to a comfort level, but knowing that was, we may very well need to return to the Planning Commission if this action doesn't proceed.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking, and this is one of the reasons why at least I know we've suggested that the commission clerks and commission chairs insist on very specific motions, is the actual condition, the written condition that the Planning Commission adopted, is it this specific action, or is it the understanding of the commission that this would be the action?
Substantially, it is this.
Okay, so we would need that approval to unwind in order to take up alternatives then?
Well, yeah, so we would, in that scenario, we would all but certainly need to go back to Planning Commission.
Okay.
We should just decline it.
Okay. Okay. Do we need any action, Mr. Mitchell? Or?
Well, I think the question before you is whether you want to continue this item to a later meeting, or deny the request of the proposal. And then that would, as indicated, would trigger a need to start the planning process back on this project, I think.
Are those our only two options? Starting the whole planning process over, or?
Well, you can continue it to a date uncertain.
Okay.
I'd rather do that.
Okay, let's do that. All right. Okay, is there any objection to that?
No.
Okay. All right, then, if not, that'll be the order. Welcome, Councilmember Sandin. All right, we just wrapped up the consent agenda, so, and we've just continued item 3, so we're now proceeding to our Time-sensitive agenda item 15 is a public hearing and adoption of the final YOLO Habitat Conservation Plan, Natural Community Conservation Plan, and final environmental impact statement report by resolutions 18-28 and 18-29, approval of ordinance 18-9, implementing the YOLO HCP NCCP, and approval of amended joint powers agreement for the YOLO Habitat Conservancy. Ms. Hamilton.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm really excited to have helped coordinate this item to come before you this evening. I do not have a staff presentation, but Ms. Marchand, the Executive Director of Yellow Habitat Conservancy, does have a short PowerPoint. So with that.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Kamal and members of the council. Patria Marchand, Executive Director of the Yellow Habitat Conservancy. It is my pleasure tonight to be before you to recommend adoption of the Yellow Habitat Conservation Plan and Natural Community Conservation Plan. As you know, today is possible because of a lot of hard work and commitment by a large number of people. But before I started, I really wanted to recognize your representative on my board, Councilmember Ledesma, who, as you know, was not only chair, but helped to make sure the Conservancy was managed from a fiscal perspective in a sustainable way and was really integral to the ability to be here tonight. And I also wanted to recognize Director Hamilton as well, who was by far the most committed staff member of all of our member agencies and provided a lot of great feedback for the plan that I know will make it better for the communities that the plan will serve. So I just wanted to start off by thanking them, both you and Charlene, for that work. I wanted to provide just a brief overview. I know you know the plan, but I'm going to go quickly through what some of the changes were since the last I presented to you on the public review draft. So first of all, nothing's changed with regard to the activities that we cover. As you know, this is 50-year permits under the State and Federal Endangered Species Act, covers all the activities in your general plan. And the conservation also remains the same, 33,000 acres over the course of 50 years. Covered species also remain the same. Just a reminder to the council and to the members of the public, we are replacing the species by species approach with a multi-species approach. So now you pay one fee for mitigation for all 12 species versus mitigating for them individually. The reserve system consists of 33,000 acres. We have 8,000 acres of new conservation, 17,000 acres that's paid for with mitigation. And the priority conservation areas are the Sacramento River, the Yolo Bypass, Cache Creek, and Pewter Creek. We cover a number of activities that are obviously of interest to the city, all of your urban projects. Operation maintenance of levees is also covered for certain activities, our conservation strategy, and then for the Farm Bureau, we're including some protection for landowners who are next to conservation easements. The benefits are widely known. Still, one of the primary benefits from a conservation perspective is that we're going to be consolidating mitigation and conservation activities into large parcels, thereby providing more interconnected tracts of land that will benefit the species that we're targeting. The old permitting process, as you may recall, had a lot of going round and round with wildlife agencies. We are replacing that with a 4-step process. And that process will hopefully, from start to finish, take no more than a few months and help to provide some certainty and stability to applicants. We did find out recently that there's a bonus to having an HCP with the 404 permitting processes, which is the Army Corps of Engineers for wetlands. Although we don't provide a wetlands permit, the HCP can help to skip a couple of really time-intensive steps with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and so hopefully in the future that will also provide some benefits to our member agencies, including the city. The costs of the program have gone up since I last was before you, and that is because land prices have increased in Yolo County primarily. There's been about a $25 million increase over 50 years. The funding sources have stayed the same. We have these really unique partnerships with the City of Davis, Solano County, and Yolo County. We have state and federal funding that will come from grants, and obviously the fees are covering about 2/3 of the cost of the program. The fees have also increased as a result of the land prices going up as well. So we now have a land cover fee of about $12,900 an acre, and the wetlands fees have similarly gone up because of land prices. So the actions, this is the big finale, the actions before you tonight are to accept public comments, adopt a resolution, and receive public comment on the ordinance, and as well as approve execution of the First Amendment and restated joint powers agreement. We do have to update the joint powers agreement because the old agreement was just for planning, and now we're moving into implementation. So we need the agreement to allow us to charge fees and take other actions that are related to implementation of the plan. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Mr. Ledesma.
Well, first of all, appreciate Petrea being here today, and appreciate your comments towards Director Hamilton and myself, but I think most on this council and our staff know that really this project and this new agency we're forming would not be possible without you and your hard work and the team's hard work at the staff. And we've had an extraordinarily active board from all our partners in Davis, Winters, Woodland, and the county that have been in the initial stages. You're right, we all rolled up our sleeves, and this was almost another full-time job for us to kind of get the JPA back on our feet. We've told that story a few times. That's what we're here to do when we did it. But to get a plan of this magnitude, of this creativeness, of this, and to get the cooperation of the agencies at the federal and state level, that never happens. It couldn't have been done without you and your team. So thank you very much on behalf of the council and the city, because this is very much due to much of your efforts. I know there are weekend nights you were calling and early mornings we talked to catch up, but there's a lot of moving parts in this to make this happen. And I know most people don't even know what the permits are for or how this works. I didn't either, starting this 6, 7, 8 years ago, whenever it was, but it all makes sense now. We have a plan in place, 50-year permits, as you pointed out, first they protect the habitat. And I was for sure thinking you were coming here with a complete slideshow to go over every species we're protecting. I know the mayor's been asking for that. But that's the important part as we, as cities in the county, move towards development, and even our public works projects. Even the levee works we're doing or will be doing, the public works projects that are anticipated, those are all factored in here to make the permitting and the process much more refined, streamlined, and predictable. That's a great word you had. So I think the public benefits in a number of ways in knowing that land's being conserved across Yolo County in a very unique, innovative way. We're able to leverage existing lands we already had, as well as use agricultural land, which is one of the strengths of our county. That has never been done. And to do it the way we did it in the 6+ years, 7+ years we've been working on it to get the plan here. I think you brought it up at the board meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, which is we passed 2 other agencies that are vying for the same permits during this time. And you got to remember, we're working with federal agencies and state agencies that I don't have a copy. You guys have the books that they had to review to, Heidi has it. And Heidi, thank you for all your work as well. But if anyone wants to know how much work this is for 50-year permits, people from the federal and state partners had to review drafts of this over and over and over again and coordinate it with another agency and coordinate it with us and our respective staffs across the county. That's no small task. So thank you very much. I'm excited that we are here. Like I said, the board took action on this 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, to ratify and get this going. I think we already had approvals by the county. That went well yesterday. And the cities of Winters and, is it Davis?
Davis.
Davis have already ratified this as well. So I'm glad we're able to bring this forward. Again, thank you very much, and looking forward to any comments or questions folks may have.
Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you. I just want to briefly comment. Before I joined this council, I knew and had heard about the work that you were doing to this end, and I understand through in the past you'd worked with now Supervisor Oscar Villegas and Mayor Cabal, and I just want to thank you on behalf of our city, as well as my 6- and 8-year-old boys who have an intense interest in covered species. I'll be happy to tell them that the western yellow-billed cuckoo will now have a bright future in Yolo County. But also thank you so much, Ms. Marchand, for coming and giving this presentation. that I know that is a time-intensive investment, but well worth all those efforts, so thank you.
Yeah, just to echo, I think when I first came on the council, this was one of my first assignments, and to scope this out. And we thought this was going to be a 2-year process to complete. That was in 1996, 7, 8, 9, 7. No, it was not 1992. I haven't been here that long. But this was supposed to be a relatively, not simple, but because it's so obvious that this makes sense for so many things. Yeah, it allows us to be friendly to projects that we want to see advance in our city. So in terms of achieving the goals of our general plan and the kinds of investments in projects and affordable housing and housing of all types and retail and everything else, this is critical to doing that because in the permitting processes and everything are unpredictable and they are circular and they are constantly changing and they're expensive. So it was obvious for that perspective, but at the same time, we were not doing a good job for Habitat before. Because it was project by project. And so, Mr. Ramos would have a parcel of land and they'd say, okay, we want to protect the Swainson's hawk, so, you got to set aside, a little piece of your property for a Swainson's hawk nest. But if the property next to him is not being developed, then they're not setting anything aside. And then what next to it? So if you're a Swainson's hawk, you kind of had to have a map of where there were development sites in the county and just be sure that's where you're stopping. And that's not how Swainson's hawks. It's certainly not how elderberry beetles or whatever the cuckoos are. That's just not how they work, right? So it was a government solution to how to solve a habitat problem that did not scientifically make any sense for how ecology really happens. So we were throwing up all these roadblocks to development and not protecting these endangered species. In a real way and spending a lot of money doing it. So it was a very, very important, and it ran into a lot of obstacles just from the bureaucracy and all kinds of other stuff. And back in those days, Mr. Ramos and Mr. Stroud, who are both here, both early participants from the beginning in that process. So landowners and others have been very active in it too. But it really did completely fall apart. And just because of the weight of all of the challenges around this kind of an effort, and so your expertise, Ms. Marchand, and certainly our staff, and then Mr. Ledesma, for whom this is not a job, right? This is the members of the city council have their own jobs and families and whatever, and so to be spending the raw number of hours. On the spreadsheets and checking all the numbers over and over, when it seemed like there were no solutions at all, but really just diving in to try to rescue this, and then go to the Capitol and do all the other work with you in order to make this process happen, knowing that maybe 5 people in the whole city would ever know about it. This is not the glory assignment for folks in elected office, but he stepped up and did that, and without him, at least on our behalf, we wouldn't be here. So I also want to echo my gratitude for his willingness to serve in this assignment, and then to take on such an enormous challenge and win. So it's great. All right, thank you. We did have one request to speak on this, and that's by David Stroud. Welcome back.
Mayor Cabal and members of the council, my name is David Stroud. I have been involved in the development of properties in West Sacramento for about 25 years, and we have a project in Southport currently that we hope to be able to re-engage in relatively soon. You guys have already really supplied all the accolades to Petrea and her group for pulling this whole thing together and making it happen. Councilman Ledesma made me promise I would come here tonight and thank him, and to thank him every time that I see him from now on of his involvement with this. I'm just kidding. In fact, I have to admit that initially I was very skeptical of the city getting involved in this process. We were enjoying a run of evading these issues for quite some time, but as I have learned over the course of the years in my business of development, that this whole process of the business of habitat mitigation, which has become a huge business, has evolved, and it needs a much cleaner way, and needed a much cleaner way, and much more active and direct way to deal with it. Probably the biggest benefit to folks in my business and to the city as well, is that there's a certain higher degree of certainty of being able to accomplish something on a piece of land that not developed or on a project that needs to mitigate for species. And most people that know what I do probably wouldn't agree that I would say something like this, but certainly there is a need for protecting species and for protecting our habitat. That's what creates value. It's what creates a great community. The county, Yolo County and the cities have accomplished something that's relatively unique. As you know, we work in Solano County. We've been doing that for years. For years, many years, Solano County has been attempting to get to the point of having an adopted HCP, and they're not close yet. So the work that Petrea has done with her disparate group of people and scientists and experts. I was appointed to the advisory committee for a while to attend for the city. Charlene Hamilton twisted my arm and said, "You got to go over there and sit there and represent your kind." I didn't have much to say. I had nothing to add. It was confusing and frustrated me, and I didn't go to too many meetings, so I had nothing to do with this at all. But in any event, I'd probably be remiss if I didn't represent my industry and say that this is just another cost of building a home and selling homes to folks who right now can't afford them. And we have many of those costs. There are layers and layers and layers of regulations that need to be dealt with, and I know my time is over and I'm done. And so I want to thank you for letting me speak today. I want to thank you for thanking Petrea, and hopefully you're going to adopt this and move on. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Anything, Councilmember Sandin?
Thank you. I'd like to add my thanks to you, Councilmember Ledesma, and also Ms. Marchand and all the folks that have been working on this. I was also at the County Board of Supervisors meeting just for a moment at the beginning of it yesterday, and I just had a quick question for you about the relationship to other organizations that might be kind of feeling that this is part of their work too, like the YOLO Land Trust, for example. So I was just wondering how the coordination works.
It's a wonderful question. This agency, the YOLO Habitat Conservancy, cannot be successful without those partners. So YOLO Land Trust right now is the easement holder for a number of our easements, and we hope that they'll continue in that role. The same is true of other organizations in Yolo County that are involved with conservation, whether it's Tuolumne or the Yolo County Resource Conservation District. We honestly plan on working with all of them. It's one of those all boats shall rise type of situations. We're hoping there'll be more funding and more resources for conservation as a result, but those are the groups that have been on the ground for the longest. The Conservancy should rely on them for expertise, and you will work to help them move forward at the same time that we're moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Great. All right, I think somebody mentioned Heidi, or maybe Heidi just piped up when I mentioned how long ago this was, but I also want to acknowledge Heidi for, she's been with this project from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Before any of us. And getting on these issues to get Davis and us and Woodland and Winters and the county on the same page. It was a challenge even when it was just a beautifully elegant idea, and in the depths of implementation, that's required a lot of facilitation and leadership by Petrea and the board and our staff and their staff, but also Heidi's done a fantastic work in helping to make that happen. So thank you.
Yep.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Yes, I'd like to probably move the recommended action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
All right, item 16 is a continued public hearing in consideration of Resolution 18-24, amending the City of West Sacramento Book of Fees for residential parking permits. Mr. Blumberg.
Periodically, staff comes to you to update the city's book of fees to address updates to, in this case, user fees. And in this case, the residential parking permit fees hadn't been updated since 1994. They're at the same rate currently as they were at that time. And so in addition to having a public hearing before you consider Resolution 1824, I wanted to give a brief overview of of why we're proposing the changes and what costs go into the revised or adjusted fee. I would just point out that while the report in the analysis section pretty much summarizes the issues related to the adjustment of the fee, your packet did not include the revised pages 5, 6, and 7, so you'll find those in front of you. And of course, the date of that revision is May 15th, and for the record. But since you have the information in your analysis section, I'll quickly go over it. The process of processing these permits is very manual. There's not a lot of technological changes to it. If you look at the one staff person who will be involved in processing, it takes about an hour to process a permit. And so in addition of the roughly 15 minutes or so having contact with the customer, they come to the business counter, they fill out an application, and it gets processed. Then you have a number of steps related to first of all, entering the database, verifying vehicle registration and/or residency of the applicant. You have the entering of information for code enforcement. So, of course, City of Sacramento does parking enforcement services for us. And so the information related to the permit not only gets entered manually into the city's database, but they have to go online and access the City of Sacramento's code enforcement site to enter that same data. So you end up having a process, like I said, that takes about an hour. There's an overhead charge on all of our user fees of roughly 45% for direct and indirect costs that are applied to that staff person processing the permit. And then about $10 for materials. You have stickers and placards. And so we came up with a revised cost of $68.84 is the total cost of processing that permit. In terms of our recommendation, though, we're recommending less than full recovery for a few reasons. Number one, we think that it's a pretty big jump for the residents there to go from $5 to full cost recovery. I mean, one option would be to maybe spread that over a number of years, that increase. But we kind of feel like the $35 amount, it's roughly half, will force us to do a few things in fiscal year 18-19. Look at ways that we can shorten the time frame for processing. I should say, even if we went to an online vendor so that folks could pay online, you'd still have the staff processes, let's say, in verifying the vehicle registration and residency. But you'd also have vendor fees. And so that would, again, you'd be taking away staff time, but you'd be adding to the cost of a vendor fee if we went to that payment system. But we do believe that there are ways to cut costs, and that's why we want to do a partial adjustment to the amount. City of Davis has gone to pay-by-plate technology. It used to be you'd have to come to the police department and kind of go through a similar process there. And recently, I think it was last month, they initiated a process where it's kind of like what we have in the Bridge District with the parking meters and with the Fifth and Bridge lot, where everything goes by the license plate. And so we'd like to see the residential permits go in that direction in the future. It'll take some time to again, work on options to do that. I should say that we are going to be moving the costs over to Fund 219, the Parking Services Fund. Right now, those costs are on the general fund. So to the extent that there's a shortfall in full cost recovery, that would be borne by the parking district and not the general fund.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Paul. I mean, you got into a lot of the issues I was concerned about this. I totally agree that we should try to cover our costs as much as possible on these things. So, one is either to raise the fees to match the costs or look at the costs themselves. So your explanation of the process, when we're looking at a way that technology could improve this process. Out of the $69 or whatever it costs to process a permit, all but 10 are staff costs. So looking through the steps that you mentioned, contact a customer could do that online. Fill out the application, customer can do that online. Entering in the database, customer can do that online with the same database. Vehicle database, I don't know if there's a way to hook up to the DMV for the actual application to do that check. No interaction by a person. The residence verification, you've got utility bills and of such that there could be a cross check with that. And then accessing SAC code enforcement, there may be some interaction there. So looking at all these, this would be, I would really be interested to see how you could just automate this entire system. And that way you can reduce the cost down to 10, and maybe you'd have to allocate staff time to actual preparation of whatever this system would be. But you're getting close to getting the permit fee down, and you're really not losing anything at that point.
Automation would be the best way to go, and other cities have done it. Like I said, there would be vendor fees, and we did do a comparison to what if we had a similar system to what we have in the Bridge District. Because of the small number of residential permits, roughly 491 per year, you don't have really great economies of scale, so your vendor fees might still be around $18 per permit, and you would have some staff time. So we think that we can get it down. We just don't know how much because of those issues.
Okay, it'd be worth investigating. This is just one example of when we're moving to look at options for technology to create better government efficiencies. This type of thing is really kind of prime. It's building permits, anything that you have any kind of interaction with the city, that you can eliminate that through online payments or online applications. Business licensing, we've gone to ability to do that online now, and we used to not do that. So, I'd be interested to see if there's maybe looking into, really what the vendor costs are, and if there's a way to maybe cooperate with maybe a city of a similar size, a similar number of permits, and see what they're doing to reduce the cost, maybe some technology they're using.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Sandine?
Thank you. You mentioned that some cities figure out a different method through their general fund or some other way to pay for the permits, and our neighbor across the river doesn't have that. Do you know more about how they are managing to do that?
Well, their parking services unit, it has been in place since, I believe, around 1960, and they've, over the years, have built up a substantial number of parking facilities, quite different revenue generation than ours. And so subsidizing a residential parking permit from other sources is a viable option. Certainly we could do that also. My concern about doing that at this time would be that we have a number of other, new lots that are being built. We've got, maintenance on those lots, other things that the council may want to do in terms of developing strategies for parking. Again, you're paying consultants. And, our revenues, I think our net revenues at the end of this fiscal year will be about $104,000. We just have very meager resources, and that's why we're recommending the adjustment.
Trying to understand it.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Just kind of echoing some of the comments from Councilmember Johannesson. It's just, I understand the exercise and the process that this is, and we're setting a fee, and it's just these types of processes you see. This seems like an easy kind of way or easy path to sort of automate it to kind of get those costs down. So I don't want to harp on that too much. I think you know that already and are looking at ways. It's just, we just got to find ways to make this a much more self-service type initiative. So, okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Others? I completely agree, and I wonder whether or not a tiered pricing system where if somebody who either does it online or brings all the materials that you need at the beginning. And so if you walk in the door, you have your utility bill, you have your vehicle registration, all the things that would be required to have this process take 5 minutes instead of 63, that you pay $5 or whatever. If you are the person that requires 63 minutes, based on this analysis, then it's the much higher level. But so that the preparation of the documents, the search for the information that we're doing today, shouldn't be our responsibility it should not be our staff's responsibility in the first place. So I mean, we're talking about like $12,000 and some change in total. That's what our discussion is right now. I mean, my other concern, I don't want residential permanent parking to become a source of significant revenue, because I don't want to keep adding more neighborhoods to it, more places to it, like we were discussing earlier. And so there becomes more of a temptation once it becomes a funding source that's supporting staff people and all of that. So, but I mean, I get that we can't go out and procure a solution, a technology solution for just this thing for $12,000. So but a $30 increase seems too aggressive for this program in this amount of time. Inflation would put it at $8, I think, or so, not 35. So I'm comfortable with an increase, but that's too steep of a jump in a single time for me.
Mayor, I feel like I'm getting direction from the council in terms of returning to look at technological solutions rather than pursuing the increase at this time. That the opportunity cost just means that we wouldn't see that adjustment for the renewal period for 18-19. But instead, we would just work on some alternative solutions, come back to you with those solutions. And if we recommend adjustment, do it at that time based on the technology that you feel comfortable with.
That makes sense? Yep. Yeah, I mean, some of what's been talked about, most of what's been talked about, you wouldn't need to come back here, right? If you're able through process redesign or technology on your own, I mean, the city manager definitely has $12,000 worth of procurement authority without council approval. So a lot of the potential answers, I guess what I'm saying is, you shouldn't feel like you need to come back here just to come back here, but if there are things, if the resolution that you ultimately come to a recommendation on does require council approval, for sure, so. Okay, so makes sense. All right, thank you. Mr. Mitchell, are you going to, do we need a motion on this one too? Okay, well, we haven't taken any action yet, and I actually haven't opened the public hearing. I haven't reopened the public hearing, so let me do that. We don't have a motion in anywhere, so we're fine. All right, so this is a public hearing on item 16. We don't have any requests to speak, but on public hearings, does anyone wish to address the council on this one? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. So you've heard our...
Continue.
Do we need to continue, or...
Because it's asking for adoption.
Or can we simply not take action, have it expire, and if staff wants to bring back another item at a future date, they can?
I think that will work. I'm looking over to Paul to see what they would prefer on that. That is a logical way to go, so.
Okay. Then let's proceed then. So there's no action for lack of a motion.
Correct.
Okay, then item 17 is continued public hearing and consideration of resolution 18-25 vacating a portion of, it's this item. Okay, so I'm recusing myself on this item because my home is right nearby, and transferring the gavel over to Mr. Ledesma. You'll need a roll call vote.
All right, this is item 17, continued public hearing and consideration of resolution 18-25 vacating a portion of the public right-of-way located at the corner of Bridge Street and Central Street and the corner of Bridge Street and Riverfront Street. Ms. Hamilton.
Good evening again. Like this is not on. The item before you is seeking approval of the abandonment of two small sections of right-of-way located at the corners of Bridge Street and Central Street and Bridge and Riverfront Street. The proposed abandonments essentially are squaring off two rounded corners, allowing for square buildings with zero setbacks as required by the Bridge District specific plan. On March 21st, The council approves the notice of intent to vacate this right-of-way. All public postings and notifications of the proposed abandonment have been performed. To date, no objections to the abandonments have been received. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions of staff at this point? Seeing none, this requires a public hearing. So with that, I will open up the public hearing. I don't think we have any requests to speak on this. However, because it's a public hearing, if anyone would like to speak, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for any comments, questions, or if it wishes, a motion.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion, item carries. Thank you very much. I'll wait for the mayor. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back before you call him in. I'm sorry. This does require a roll call vote, so Madam Clerk, if you can go through the roll call, please.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Johannesson?
Yes.
Councilmember Sandin?
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, then proceeding to item 18, which is consideration of Resolution 18-34, approving and adopting amendments to the budget for fiscal year 18-19. Ms. Raper.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'll keep this short. The biennial budget for the 2 fiscal years, 17-18 and 18-19, was adopted by council on June 14th, 2017. 2 weeks ago, we held a workshop where we presented an update on the fiscal activity for the current year and provided information regarding proposed adjustments for the 18-19 fiscal year. We took input and feedback from each of you and incorporated into the proposed budget that is before you tonight. Because this is a midterm budget review, the proposed adjustments are limited to necessary changes that were unknown or unanticipated at the time of original budget development and adoption. So there's only, I believe, 2 changes in this report from what you saw 2 weeks ago. The first one's related to the operations and maintenance side of the road fund activities. In the previous report, there was included an intention to use about $250,000 in revenues, annual revenues from waste management toward operations and maintenance costs, as the road fund's been running a structural deficit the past few years as the gas tax revenues have declined. Those funds were designated for capital needs by the Public Works Director, but given the deficit and where we are, we've decided we'd like to use those for 1 year to bring the fund, the O&M side of the fund, out of deficit, while we consider other solutions, longer-term solutions for that, knowing that there are significant capital needs related to road repairs as well. And so we're looking at several different ways, to perhaps look at costs, cut costs, improve revenues, look at how administrative costs are allocated, but we'll be looking at those over the next year and come with a solution in the next, with the next 2-year budget. And the other change is there was $50,000 requested under the Title Mobility Action Plan work as it relates to one of the strategic priorities for the year. It is just a name change to make sure that that is not confused with the actual development of a mobility action plan, which we received some grant funds for, and we've got a match for that. So it's been changed to emerging innovations in mobility, and it really is approving a budget or setting aside some funds in the budget for emerging innovations in mobility, and having staff do work to respond to either council requests or other things that are happening in that space. Because it uses the public works folks who typically are charging out to projects or other chargeable billable activities. So the end result is the budget tonight is essentially the same budget that was submitted to you 2 weeks ago, with a couple of name changes. And so with that, I will take any feedback you have, or we're asking you to adopt a resolution approving the budget changes for 18-19.
All right, Ms. Orozco.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Raper. I had a comment and a question. The comment had to do with the Community Development Support Services Fund, specifically the proposition of adding the proposal, rather, of adding a full-time permanent technician program or position to support the building and development engineering permit applications. I know there are going to be some very happy people. I know that there was some delay in the process, and I've heard from a lot of our members of our community. So I think that's going to alleviate some of that stress waiting for permits to be approved, so I agree with that. I just had a question on the Measure E sales tax proceeds, specifically the FY 18-19 homeless cleanup and enforcement. I'm wondering that of the $508,000 that's budgeted, what does that include?
Well, we had a detailed report in the last program, so I do have that with me. And when we're looking at, I'm trying to look at what year. I'm wondering if Nitish might be able to respond faster than I can. Yeah.
There are a couple of items included, major items were the homeless cleanup and enforcement costs, basically homeless camp cleanups, and also a position related to the homeless coordinator for 1 year, and we'll come back to council for long-term funding need. But majority of the costs were for the homeless program, cleanup and enforcement.
Is that the one that's existing currently where we
Yes.
hire? Oh, I see.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I found the page. We're looking at exactly the same budget for 18-19 as we did for 17-18 as far as the program administration costs and the rapid response team and public and open space cleanup. The only change is requesting a full year of funding for the homeless coordinator position. We had about 9 months of funding in the last year, and this is a 1-year request while we definitely find a long-term solution to fund that position.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that there'll be a funding proposal coming forward to deal with the structural deficit for the road fund. That just, we definitely need to deal with that. So thank you for having that on the work plan.
Thank you.
I just
Mayor
have,
Pro Tem Ledesma?
yeah, I have nothing specific, because we did look at this last meeting, right? Yeah, thank you. But I know there was a lot of, you took a lot of direction from us last time as we look forward, going forward. I just want to, again, go back to underlining, just, we know that going forward, there's this budget, the general fund will be, specifically, is going to be challenged with the ongoing PERS payments we'll have to make, and I know that's a common problem we'll have to see. And what I guess kind of my question might be for staff to think about as we approve this and go about is the next budget planning cycle is to really start to think about, and when we start projecting out that cost, is to make sure that we articulate that pretty clearly. I know we're waiting, I think we are getting some real actuarial numbers from them now. It's just going to be really something we have to keep an eye on, especially as sales tax initiatives we talked about earlier are being discussed about from the legislative level. There's just all sorts of external impacts, and just finding ways to continue to come back and brief us on any, either quarterly, biannually, on budgeting issues. So we don't have to wait every year to do it, like once a year to kind of come back at this one-time adjustment. Just how do we kind of continue to watch these types of activities?
Well, you just made my day, because you asked for me to come in front of you on more often to provide updates, and that's something that I love to do. So one of the things that we're actually jumping into now, we're not waiting, is doing some long-term financial planning. I believe our numbers from CalPERS will come out in July this year, and we've been meeting with them quite a bit to make sure we're staying on top of what some of the impacts and changes might be. So this is something that we're jumping into now. We will definitely report back to you sort of the outcome of what our projections are before we get near jumping into the next budget cycle. And I would love to come back and give regular updates on some of those, so you'll definitely see that.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very critical. I mean, the CalPERS situation alone is the most significant and severe fiscal threat that we face as a city. I mean, to some extent we underplay it because it's every single year it gets worse. But so we're kind of like a frog that's been boiling and not noticing how awful it really is in terms of our fiscal situation. But we were talking earlier about the HD supply issue that was that revenue loss was the same as the increase in costs for CalPERS. And if somebody were to say tomorrow, IKEA is now gone next year, and then the year after that, Home Depot and Lowe's, they're both gone, and then the year after that, the impact, just the continuing annual compounded impact of those costs is enormous, and there is not a foreseeable way for us to be able to continue to deliver the level and the quality of service, and also to recruit and retain the best folks to do that work on behalf of our citizens. And so we don't have any control over that in the city, or not much, but it is really essential that we have regular updates about where we stand and what the new actuaries are, and how and the assumptions that PERS continues to make that shift some of these costs to us. So I really appreciate the Mayor Pro Tem's insistence on really keeping an eye on this at the council and community level on an ongoing basis, because it's really critical for us to be able to not just continue our success, but to continue the basic services that are so fundamental in our community. So. Thanks.
Just to add to that, I spent a few days last week at the National Association for Latino Elected Officials, and we had a workshop on municipal bonds and municipal finance. This is a national conference, but I mean, it's not just regionally. Cities throughout California are being hit with this PERS issue, and so we spent an exorbitant amount of time talking about and seeing how it's hit different cities. Luckily for us, we're not the worst hit, but at the same time, we appreciate that the long-term financial forecasting that you're offering, and then the updates, because of that planning. Luckily, we aren't in the worst position, but everybody's being hit very, very hard, and so. Welcome, by the way. I don't know if you had an official welcome at a city council meeting, Roberta, but we really appreciate what you've put together here and your commitment to the city.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and all of the kudos go to the staff, Natish and Paul, and everyone else did a great job pulling all of this good information together for you.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may follow up on one of the items that Councilwoman Orozco mentioned, the homeless account, and as it relates to open space cleanup and enforcement. I think you're looking for the capacity to fund
Correct.
downtown streets. That's not in here because that $250,000 that we have targeted for supportive housing on downtown streets has not been approved yet, but there is
Correct.
capacity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Great. All right. Seeing no further discussion, is there a motion on the item?
I'll move the recommended action to adopt the resolution.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Ledesma, and seconded by Ms. Orozco. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 19 is consideration of Resolution 18-35, approving and adopting amendments to the Capital Improvement Program budget for fiscal year 2018-19. Mr. Sharma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Today, we are respectfully recommending the City Council consider approving Resolution 1835, approving and adopting amendment to the capital improvement budget for fiscal year 2018-19. On May 9th, 2018, staff presented to City Council the proposed budget amendments to seek council feedback. The few directions provided that has been addressed in this report. In your packet, we have included a comprehensive list of active projects and planned projects. Due to the number of active projects, 196 active projects with a total of $102 million in remaining commitments, the staff is proposing very limited number of adjustments, 25 budget adjustments totaling $14.3 million. One of the things you'll see in the new request, a lot of these projects are funded with leverage with state or federal funding. For example, Rayleigh's Dock, we have a request of $1.1 million to provide match of $1.5 million in federal funds. Sycamore Trail, request of $950,000 to provide a $1.1 match to SACOG funds. One change in here is in the Measure K allocation. We have a one-time allocation of $100,000 for a targeted traffic operations improvement. On May 9th report, this was the residential traffic calming project, so it's not different projects, it's the same project, the name changed. And this project basically will provide funding to improve crosswalk, ramps, signal, and flashing beacons at multiple locations, Oakland Bay Drive, Lake Washington Highland Drive, and Bear River Village Parkway. In addition, we also have a request of $100,000 loan from Measure G towards the Parking Improvement Fund for the improvement of the West Capitol Avenue parking lot renovation. As I said, even in the active projects, in all the projects, we are requesting, the city's been very successful in securing outside funding for a number of projects. Also, I want to make a note that each capital fund is separate and the revenues are restricted within that fund. For example, water fund is, water capital projects are funded by rate revenues, water bonds, or federal or state revenues related to water. So with that said, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Other questions for Mr. Sharma? I might be missing, this might be a transfer somewhere else, but in the Measure E Fund 110,
Yes.
the West Capitol Avenue bike and pedestrian safety improvements, these are the improvements that are partially funded by the state grants? The OTS or other grants? Or is this a different project?
Let me see. Is the Sycamore Trail slurry striping project?
No, the one after that.
West Capitol Avenue. Yes, this is actually combined with other project that has state funds in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything further on this item? No?
And this was at the last meeting, council meeting.
Yeah. Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for the format. I think it's very easy to follow. I think in the past, it's been difficult to kind of look at the deviations, and this kind of puts it right front and center with the explanation, so thanks for that.
Nice. Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and move the recommended action to adopt Resolution 1835 on the capital improvement program.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That brings us to item 20, which is presentation and discussion on YOLO Local Agency Formation Commission recommendation for Reclamation District reorganization within West Sacramento, and consideration of Resolution 18-38, adopting a resolution of application seeking a change of organization of Reclamation Districts 537 and 900. Ms. Hamilton?
Okay. All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. We're back before you this evening, as requested from the action in March, to present our findings from additional analysis that was requested. But first, I'd like to begin with just a little bit of a review and orientation with some maps on the areas that we're going to be talking about. So this exhibit was taken from the LAFCO's website, and it shows quite a few of the other reclamation districts that surround the area of West Sacramento. And here is West Sacramento, and this is the RD 900, Reclamation District 900. RD 537 is actually bisected by the Sacramento bypass. And so the southern portion, this section here, occurs within our city boundaries. And then there is a section of Reclamation District 537 that occurs north of the bypass outside of our city. And the LAFCO, the recent LAFCO recommendation from February is going to affect this portion of Reclamation District 537 in that they are recommending a merger of all the districts up in the Elkhorn area. And there's 3 other districts that they're going to be merging together. And so one other thing to note on this particular exhibit is that the cities of Woodland and Davis do not have any reclamation districts within their incorporated boundaries, nor does Winters, which is off of this exhibit. And so with that, we'll move more now into an exhibit that is very focused on West Sacramento. And the subsidiary district proposal that staff is recommending would affect essentially those areas that are shown or bound in the red. So it would be the entirety of Reclamation District 900, and then the southern portion of Reclamation District 537, which only lies within our city limit lines. Also on this exhibit is the area over in the northeast, which is predominantly Washington, the rivers, Bright, Broderick. That is essentially maintained by the city on internal drainage, and then DWR, the State Department of Water Resources, maintains the levee, and it is often referred to in documents as Maintenance Area 4 or Levee Maintenance Area 4. And that area is not a part of this action or a part of the LAFCO process. And so with that, moving on to the revised analysis. So back in March, and actually starting at the LAFCO meeting, there were many questions raised about the LAFCO recommendation, which is to have a change of governance of the two reclamation districts within our city limits to change to city council governance as subsidiary districts. And so we went back and did further analysis in these areas that are shown here to address a lot of the questions and concerns that were raised by the public, by other consultants, and also by yourselves. At the time, the analysis that was the original analysis that was presented had two options in it. One was a complete merger with the city. In other words, a merger and a change where a city would take over everything. And then the other option was the subsidiary district. And so the revised analysis that's contained in the agenda report is now focused solely on the subsidiary district concept. We are no longer looking at the merger. So, for example, under legal and liability, we've gone back, we've taken a look at that. The city attorney's office has looked at that specific to subsidiary districts. And all of the points that were raised, specifically by the memo by Council Scott Shapiro, they have found to be moot, because those were more about a city merger, complete takeover, as opposed to subsidiary district. And so that information is contained in the agenda report. Then we moved on to operational and looking at structure and how the reclamation districts have been operating. And under the subsidiary district model and looking at the LAFCO's report and the Corps of Engineers and Department of Water Resources inspections, beyond what was noted in the inspections by DWR and the Corps, which there was some unsatisfactory marks noted in the LAFCO report, we didn't find any other reasons to really change operational issues. So we're still, again, just focused on the change of governance at the board level. Financially, we did, again, really hone in on the change of governance only. So the original financial analysis, we did bring on EPS to assist pulling that together, and they did look at two different options again, the complete city merger and or subsidiary district. And so our team, and with the Administrative Services Department, which has finance, and our new director, Director Raper, they essentially took the EPS analysis and built upon it and did further research and analysis. And so the analysis that's contained in the agenda report was prepared by them. And it does show, it does answer a lot of the questions that were raised by the reclamation districts. So some costs that were taken out by EPS have been put back in. But it is still showing a cost savings, and the cost savings is predominantly from elimination of the two boards and going to a single governing board, and an elimination of the two part-time managers for Reclamation District 537. And so that is showing a cost savings. There is no change in the staffing as far as any elimination of staff, no change in their pay or benefit structure. We did not even look at a CalPERS model because there is no recommendation to pull them in at this point as city employees. Again, just focusing on change of governance only. And so that's reflected in the budget. The other change that from March and from LAFCO is LAFCO initially was indicating in their report that they wanted the city to also take over levee maintenance area 4, which is the one that state DWR does the levee maintenance, where we and the city does the internal drainage. As a follow-up to that, LAFCO did some additional research into that and found that levee maintenance area 4 cannot be part of the LAFCO process. It is actually would be a direct conversation between the city and state DWR. And so that would be something that would happen at a later date should we choose to want to strike up that conversation with DWR. And then we also took a look at the California Environmental Quality Act as part of preparing for this to determine, how much, if any, environmental analysis would be required. And should we be doing some of that now as a part of our analysis to bring forward to you? And in consultation with the executive director of LAFCO, it was determined that there is an actual specific exemption in CEQA. It's section 1, where do I have that? It's a class 20. So it's 15320, section 15320 of CEQA. And class 20 consists of changes in the organization or reorganization of local government agencies where the changes do not change the geographical area in which previously existing powers are exercised. And it specifically calls out establishment of a subsidiary district. So, that's where we'll likely land on CEQA if you choose to file an application. And as a part of your direction, you had appropriated $50,000 from non-assigned general fund monies. To date, on this revised analysis, we've really tried to keep the cost down, and we have only spent approximately $22,000. And so there will likely be, probably 50% remaining, so that will return to the general fund. And then lastly, there's been a lot of questions raised about, why are we pursuing this? What's changed? What's broken? I mean, that came up at the chamber. Why are we trying to fix something that's not broken? And in closing, the staff, through all of this analysis and through the questions, how this began with LAFCO and them reaching out to us and asking us, had anything changed, and could we look into some things and provide information to them, we did start to find things that we didn't realize were such an issue. And the agenda report highlights, public access, being able to access agendas. You have to literally go to the offices to find their meeting agendas, and or you have to call. And the transparency, the meeting agendas don't have a lot of explanation on them. Even we were having trouble finding information as a part of this analysis. We believe that the change in governance will definitely bring about better coordination and planning, whether it's coordination planning on long-range plans, drainage plans, and/or in an emergency event, should there be one. And then also, it will bring about representation for the renters in our city, the residential renters and the business tenants. In Reclamation District 537, we took a look at it, and 61% of that area has renters. Actually, it's the north area, the whole north area has 61% renters. And Southport, the Reclamation District 900 area, is about 39% renters. So we believe it'll bring about better representation for the renters and also business tenants. In 537, well, both reclamation districts really, we have a lot of high-value business properties. And in Reclamation District 537 in particular, there's two really significant assets. One is our water treatment plant, and the second is the CHP Academy. And so we think the change in governance will really benefit the protection of all properties. And then lastly, it really will result in only one board that the people of our city have to reach out to if they do have a levy issue or a drainage issue, as opposed to trying to search out not only the city council in some areas and then the two different RD boards in the other areas. And so with that, the city staff team is recommending that we move forward with an application to LAFCO to reorganize the reclamation districts into subsidiary districts under city council governance. And we have included a resolution, if you choose to do so, that LAFCO would require in order for us to submit the application. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Other questions? Mr. Johannesson?
Thank you, Charlene, for the presentation. So in coming up with this recommendation, what options did you consider? There would be option of do nothing, and then the recommended action is to make this movement for the city to take over control of these assets. Were there any other options considered?
Well, the other option was merger, and we moved away from that.
Was an option considered that the city would just do drainage and a combined redevelopment or reclamation district would take over the levees? Was that considered at all?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, so we don't really know if that would be beneficial or not?
That would require a lot more analysis, and we'd also be looking at properties then, too.
So just going through some of the points of the perceived issues with the current situation. So say you did have an option where the RDs would take over the levees, maintenance of the levees, and then the city would take over the drainage issues inside. So the customer service as a single point of contact would be satisfied with an option like that, I would think.
You would still have the second point of contact for the levees.
Right, if there's a levy issue, but if it's a drainage issues within, it would be the city. Similar to, right now, we have animal control, right? And there's a couple of points of contacts on that and a lot of other issues where the county and city both interact with that. On the drainage coordination, if the city controlled all the drainage, you wouldn't have a drainage control coordination issue, I don't think, because the city would control it. Transparency, the city would be operating that, so there'd be no issue with that. You'd still have, I think, probably a transparency issue if the RD continues to, not print agendas or the issue that I think you've identified. The ability to continue multi-benefit drainage facilities would be satisfied as the city took over the drainage system. The governance, city council would be, city took over the drainage system, that would be covered. So it seems to me that all these points would be covered under that scenario, but it hasn't been investigated.
Correct.
So I guess the question is, I mean, I would like to have more information on that to see if that's a viable option.
Okay.
But, I mean, it seems like there were just a few options considered, and one that appears to would satisfy all these requirements wasn't considered. So, just a comment at this point.
Okay, other questions or comments at this time? Okay, we have a few comments, public comments on this one. So the first is by Ryan Johnston. Just to cue folks up so we keep the process moving. After Ryan will be Sheila Johnston, and then Tom Martin, if he's still here.
All right, buckle up. I'm going to be reading my own handwriting. This is going to be rough. Just to elaborate on some of the things that were just stated, my understanding was that Davis and Woodland don't have reclamation districts because they don't have levees. So I was kind of lost on what was being stated there. I also understood that LAFCO, RD 900, they are compliant. My understanding of the law, I believe it's the Brown Act, that they do post. If you're not satisfied with how they post, rest assured, I believe they are in compliance with the law. So I don't really understand what the point was there either. But to the bulk of what I wanted to say, 3 minutes is not long enough for me to convey every item or issue or expose the flaws with the city's position. I simply would like to request that council members read and analyze the LAFCO report and the city's report from the perspective of a tax-paying resident before you vote. Consolidation of reclamation districts is a good idea. However, a fledgling city that is younger than I am has no business taking over flood protection services from a special district that has been successfully maintaining and serving for over 100 years. Many of the city/mayor's arguments, in the LAFCO report are misrepresented or flat out wrong. And if you just simply read the reports and start connecting the dots, I think you'll see for yourself there's contradictions in our own report. Just from a common sense perspective of a homeowner or someone living here looking at it, it just doesn't pan out. Tonight's agenda references your own agenda for tonight references a singular LAFCO recommendation. You elaborated on that. There are other options now, and I appreciate what you brought to light just now very much. There are other options that have not yet been explored. The fact is there were two, and later in your presentation you did reference that there were two recommendations initially. One of them simply doesn't involve the city getting any money. If the city's motives are for safety and the best interest of the people, then why didn't our city study the feasibility of the other LAFCO recommendation? Money, money, money. I appreciate that the 50,000 is now only 22, but that money could have and should have gone to law enforcement or maintaining a road, which we just learned was an issue.
Mr. Johnson, I have to ask you to
Yeah, I have about 2 lines left, if that's okay?
That's cool.
Thanks. The city claims financing for the levee maintenance has changed. That was a quote from one of the documents. I see a capable RD 900 having recently secured funding. Again, money. The change I see is an unprecedented power and money grab perpetrated by the city of West Sacramento.
Mr. Johnson, I got to call time.
Yeah, last line here. After conducting my own research, I can't see the logic or the benefit to we the people.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Sheila Johnston will be followed by Tom Martin. Is he gone? Okay, and then Pat Flint.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. The most important form of government is local government. This is one lesson I have learned in my 14-year career in public policy and my graduate degree in public policy. I'm sorry to say that today, I believe that my local government is broken. The manner in which the LAFCO recommendations have been interpreted by the city is dishonest. I have read the LAFCO report and do not see any problems in the manner in which RD 900 is operating and in its commitment to levee and flood maintenance. I read the report as an opportunity to collaborate between the 16 agencies that LAFCO cited in its report that maintain floods and levees in this area. LAFCO has not presented a need for the city to take over, rather an opportunity to collaborate. City Council and Mr. Mayor, today you have an opportunity to listen to the residents of West Sacramento. These are the residents that you represent. Do not confuse your responsibility with having to take action. Sometimes leadership is not taking action. If you want to lead, look at RD 900's examples of leadership. They are responsive to the community within 5 minutes of going to their website, probably less. I called RD 900, I got a call back from RD 900 in the same day. I saw their agendas, I saw their minutes. I don't understand why you reference that they are not transparent. Please collaborate. Use RD 900 as an example. Mr. Mayor, today you were at Sac State talking to the students about how important it is to collaborate. Please, you have this opportunity, use this. And please do not continue down this road and lose even more credibility with the citizens of West Sacramento. You have been entrusted to represent. Please maintain the residents' desire to keep a separation between local government agencies. I respectfully request your no vote on this item.
Thank you. And Pat Plant will be followed by Bob Shabert.
Well, since you did not listen and you did not pull the item, I must speak. The city seems to think that they can put together general plans to present to the public, especially the Parks and Recommendation Master Plan, and push plans through without speaking to agencies that these plans will impact, and in this case, a hostile takeover of the reclamation districts. And I say hostile because I know of confrontations between the city manager and some of the reclamation district personnel. I know that Mr. Cabaldon spoke to LAFCO, and some of his actions were not actions I would approve of myself. The board did not give you permission to go across school property. You assumed that it would be okay and made plans up for that. I see the same games, just different players. Now the hostile takeover of the RDs, and yes, the mayor and the city manager have been confrontational. Minutes of the 900 and 537 RDs board reflect staff met with city staff early on, and it was explained to them that the city master plan requires all future drainage facilities, which would include detention ponds. The city assumed RD would take over and control. Now the city wants to control the reclamation districts. Why? These flood control runoff drainage ponds would have recreation and habitat enhancements associated with them, according to the city. No communication, no cooperation, no planning together, just being told what is going to happen. I read one article where Jeff Mount, a UCD geologist and former member of the State Reclamation Board, stated that he would like to address flood control on a regional basis, but the local districts are in place, can respond quickly, and are less expensive to run. This is not about anything except flood protection and public safety, except the city wants the money. They don't care for our welfare. They never have. You have never, ever worried about the welfare of the city. And now you're claiming that's one of the biggest things here that needs to be done. And Charlene, I'm sorry. Some of the things you said are very lame because the city has done some of the very same things in their governance. We need to thank the Reclamation District for keeping us safe, as 900 since 1911 has been in effect, and we have not flooded once. With the RD's newly passed 30-year assessment, it did not allow for increased assessment for facilities and additional features. Perhaps if the city would have been proactive and addressed these with the Reclamation District a few years ago, this would not have been an issue today.
All right, Ms. Flint, same conclusion.
Okay, I'm almost finished here.
You need to wrap up.
Mr. Mayor, don't push me because I'm getting really angry with you.
You always
As-
have been, Pat? So
Yeah, you know what?
The same time limits apply to everyone.
Excuse me. I will finish here in just a minute. This is about money. It said so in the transmittal that you want to be able to move these accounts around and borrow from them. That's the only reason you want to take over this district. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bob Shaver will be followed by Dan Ramos.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, I don't think I'm going to be popular tonight. I was deputy sheriff in these streets until the very last night before we became a city. The city means a lot to me. I've invested in the city. I own numerous rental properties in the city. Flood control, obviously, is a very, very important issue to me. When we first became a city, we probably weren't able to handle the flood control issues like we are today. We are now a full city. We've got the manpower to do it. I think we should be handling our own flood control issues. I'm going to switch hats here. I'm a member of the Lake Association Board of Directors. It's the retention pond on Linden Road. RD 900 has been taking care of us. We've had a good relationship with them. But I think it's maybe time that the city takes over and does everything for ourselves. We should be self-contained at this point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dan Ramos will be followed by Tom Ramos.
Good evening, Mayor Cabal, members of City Council. Dan Ramos with Reclamation District 900, celebrating 100 years of service to this community, over 100 years. I've got 3 minutes tonight. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'll be brief because I won't have a chance to refute a lot of this. But based on our last meeting here where this was discussed and it was recommended that the staff go back and study this issue, the Reclamation districts reached out and recommended that we hopefully can get a dialogue going with the City Council, a 2x2, but we can sit down and really have an open, transparent discussion about all of these matters here in terms of cost, governance, liability, and have that dialogue and give everybody an opportunity to really understand all the issues here. So like I said, I'm limited with my time tonight to do this. So we want to make that offer again. RD 900, I know Tom will speak, and we didn't try to dress alike here tonight. That was we had a graduation reception we both went to. But anyway, we would really encourage the opportunity for us to sit down, have a discussion, and do what's right for this community. There is no hurry here. I want to make understand. I'm very familiar with the LAFCO process. I'm involved in the Reclamation District up in the Elkhorn area there. So I know the timing on this. There's no hurry to get this done, but we do need to have, there's some real, especially when it comes to costs, operational, and Mayor, you brought up at the LAFCO on governance, and I kind of agree with you on governance. I think it's time that we look at how this reclamation districts, there's government. I think some of the LAFCO reclamations is very off. I think we're open to talk about how 900 and 537 could combine and become really 900 be the reclamation district with the city. But with this importance that we talk about flood protection here, having a single purpose entity with good citizens from this community involved in that board, representing us and giving the focus on this high priority, I think is very, very important. And I want to point out to you, mentioned, in the staff report, no other city in the county has reclamation district. Well, that's because West Sac's the only one, and the county has a reclamation up in Knights Landing there. It's because we're along the river here. But I can point out, there's many urbanized areas that have reclamation districts that are involved in. That's up in the Yuba City, Marysville area, all around the Stockton and the Delta area there. In urbanized areas, they have reclamation districts that do their duty and do it very well. We're very efficient at also, doing drainage facilities and also levee maintenance. I think, one thing I know that's been, and I appreciate it, because one of you have had discussions, most of you had nice discussions with the city manager in terms of what we feel could be a real collaborative effort to really come out of this with a win-win with the right organization to go forward. So I just asked him for more time to be able to do that, and I hope you grant it to us tonight. So I asked you, my recommendation would be, is postpone any decision on this tonight, put together a process, we can have a dialogue, and let's work together, come back to LAFCO with a recommendation from all the parties involved that we can really do this right and serve this community and really do the best job we can for flood protection and levee maintenance in this community. I really think it's important that we do that. So we're open for discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Tom Ramos? And Tom will be followed by Sabrina Lockhart.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Hope I don't too repetitive what's already been said by my brother and others, but I'm a trustee of 537, so I feel it was important to be here tonight. And I also am recommending that you postpone any vote on this resolution. And I think if the way I interpret this resolution, you make an action tonight, it's out of your hands. It goes to the general manager and it goes to LAFCO and it never comes back to you. And here we are at a point where it's contentious. There isn't a consensus among the community, and we have asked for a conversation with, us. We know the flood business. We've offered to discuss some of the issues that have been brought up, especially about internal drainage and how those probably can be made better. And I think we can, do that. And wouldn't it be great to go back to LAFCO with a consensus from this area, this community? This is how we want to handle this, LAFCO. I think they would be very appreciative of it, and I think the community would too. But barring that, some of the issues of this report, I think it falls short of the information you guys need to make this decision. The liability issue, she said, is mute. It's 4 little lines. And you might have been briefed by your counsel, and they might have said you might have some protection there. But we've been briefed by other attorneys and stuff, that those that are involved in flood, and they said there is a real issue here. You're going to step into the position that the state is driving the nail into. And if you think a little wall that says we're the council, but they're a subsidiary district is going to work, I don't know. I'd ask a little more information from your council. So look at that. The financial information, it was one little point in time. It's the transfer. There's no additional cost for city oversight or any of those things. And I think those need to be looked at together, with us together. Finally, the governance deal has been brought up before, and it's personal to me, because at LAFCO, we were considered carpetbaggers or folks that didn't live here and whatnot. But in my case, I'm a trustee of 537. Why? There are no residents of 537 in the city. I was asked to serve. I have a background in it. Christ, my wife worked for the Corps of Engineers and actually was the planner in the original 1990 flood project that Ken Rusich and R.D. Ninehaven, did before Safeco was even put together. So I have some experience. I offered it. I think I've offered some value, and I'm willing to do that now to find a solution for the community as a whole. So with that, if you have any questions? Hearing none? Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. All right. Sabrina Lockhart will be followed by Danny Langford.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've been to more council meetings in the last 10 months than I have the entire 15 years that I've lived here. And at these meetings that I've attended, I keep hearing about we don't have enough resources to pay for what matters most. Police to keep our streets safe, funding to make our roads better. But at the same time, we apparently have money for things that are nice to have. Social media monitoring, electric bikes and bicycle rest stops. Even tonight, the council voted on budget adjustments because there's been unexpected additional spending, and you had a discussion about the pension liabilities that the state faces. So it's a budgeting philosophy that would be like me buying my kid a brand new pair of Jordans when I don't have enough money to put food on the table. It just doesn't make sense. That's why it's so astounding to me that the city would take on the added responsibility of flood protection and claim to do it better and cheaper than RD 900, who's been doing it for more than a century and whose sole mission is protecting our city from floods. It's also disappointing to see missing information from the agenda packet. The lengthy LAFCO report was included as it was last time, but what's missing for a second time is the letter from former Mayor Kristoff warning about the RD 900 takeover. Another missing piece of important information is a legal opinion from somebody licensed to practice law in California about the liability of taking on this new responsibility. The city is self-insured. RD 900 has its own insurance. One claim against our city about flood protection can bankrupt it. It's irresponsible to gamble the city's resources, limited resources, when RD 900 is done and can continue to do its job responsibly without jeopardizing our city's future. I also really fear that this is just a money grab and that there will be no accountability to ensure that flood protection is truly spent on keeping us safe from floods rather than funding pet projects under the guise of flood safety. So I urge you, please take up RD 900 on their offer to meet and come up with a compromise. It's instead of working together and finding a common sense solution, you're going for the nuclear option, which would have a detrimental impact on our city. So please, don't rush. Thank you.
Thank you. And Danny Langford, and then Martha Guerrero.
Hi again. In looking at the agenda packet, I want to make some rebuttal comments. In regards to financing, the city's comment about financing levy maintenance, neither reclamation district has debt. The city has debt. Clearly, the reclamation districts are better at financing their operations. In regards to the reclamation has changed from protection of ag land to protection of 55,000 people in urbanized structures. The purpose of the reclamation district has always been flood protection. The priority has not and will not change regardless of the number of residents, businesses, and urbanized structures within the reclamation boundaries. In regards to the majority of the combined reclamation district governing members, in addition to the two Ramuses that spoke tonight, another board member is the grandson of Arthur Turner from Turner Library here in West Sac. Not to mention Mr. Palmadesi and Mr. Denton, who served for years. It is despicable that the city would imply these board members do not care about the city because their descendants do not currently live here. These are long-term families that have active businesses in the community and care deeply for the city. I think you all know that. In regards to the neighborhoods of Broderick and Bright, and all renters in the city do not have representation of either reclamation districts. Like you heard tonight, they're controlled by the city and the levies are run by the state. So why would they have representation on the board anyway? I don't get that. In regards to public accountability, I find it disgraceful, again, about them not being transparent. The bottom line is the reclamation districts have greater public transparency than the city does. Just do a public records request and find out. Any money spent by the agencies goes towards flood protection, period, only. In regards to the city wanting to use the levees for roads, trails, and detention ponds, this is exactly why the city shouldn't do this, shouldn't be in charge of levees. Levees serve a single purpose, to protect our homes and our property. This is all that the people that maintain the levees should have on their mind. They shouldn't have to worry about trails and roads and developers. In regards to the city investing more money since inception, the city has been being misleading. The reclamation districts are in charge of the maintenance which property taxes pay for. West Sacramento Flood Agency is an agreement between RD 900, RD 537, and city for the repair of the levees. West Sacramento Flood Agency
not the city, is obtaining the financing for the levee repairs, and property owners are also paying for the levee repairs through our property taxes. The voters approved Measure V, so sales tax revenue could go to flood protection. Please do not approve this tonight. As they asked, and I know, Ms. Sandine, you were not here when I made my comment at public comments. I saw where you asked
Ms.
for
Langford.
the 2x2. I'm almost finished.
Yeah, but your
For
time,
the
your time has
2x2, she
expired.
did not hear this.
Yes, but
For the
that's-
2x2 meeting
this is
with
not that
them,
time.
why is this?
Mayor Cabalden, City Council members, I am in strong opposition to this recommendation tonight. I have seen a number of issues that have been raised, and in taking a look at this, I find it very hard that it comes before you so quickly. But I've looked at further was the letter on November 15 from RD 900, President Denton, where he asked to take into consideration an opportunity to review the plans that under the general plan update, where they would be assuming some control of some changes that would happen there. And as chair of the Planning Commission, I contacted him. As former chair of the Planning Commission, I was very curious to know what concerns there were, and I did not hear of this one. So I contacted him and asked, I contacted RD 900 and asked, were you aware of this being included in the general plan? And, I don't think they were. And I understand the general plan took a number of years before it was approved, and there were plenty of opportunities for folks to provide update. But it was really something that the commissioners were concerned and interested to make sure that this was vetted, that we reached out, and if there was a substantive change, to really go out and make sure that those impacted would be notified. And to see that projects, such as this, and that would have an impact in RD 900, the Nest, the Sycamore Trails, Linden Loop, and the list goes on, is very concerning to me, how that you receive feedback saying this is not something you want in the community, or it happened too quickly. So looking at the public safety of our residents is my number one concern, and also taking into account the unmet needs of police and fire, and the personnel needs that we need to achieve there. And taking a look at unmet needs in our community is something that I see that looking at the takeover is not something that we should be doing at this point. I think Bill Christoph's letter is something that really captures the essence of someone with 30 years of experience who is making the argument that we should not be taking over. However, I'd like to suggest the recommendations by the Ramos brothers tonight, to sit down. This is something I think as a city council, to sit down and take a look at this further, to see what we can do to achieve a bridge, an ability to make this happen before it moves forward to LAFCO. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Hamilton, do you have anything further?
No.
Okay, then we'll turn to the council. Ms. Cindy, you're a representative on the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency and also on the local agency formation commission. You want to lead off any questions or comments?
I actually have a whole set of questions, and I really appreciate the input we're receiving tonight. So just a set of questions, and I may ask some perhaps second round, but there's concerns about the funding and the proposal that's before us tonight, and I guess I'm hearing how the funds would be sequestered for flood control purposes if this proposal moved, because there's a whole set of processes that happen.
Correct. So yeah, there was quite a few comments tonight that seemed to, it sounds like they're thinking that this is a merger, and it's not. We're really just talking about a change in the governance of the board. We're not talking about the city now suddenly, like finance, taking over, doing the finances. All that stays the same. The reclamation district staff stay in place, the consultants that are currently paying their bills, their attorney, all of that stays the exact same.
And the reclamation districts stay in place.
Yes, so the revenues would come from the county to the reclamation districts. There's not going to be any commingling, transferring. I'm not even sure where that's coming from under a subsidiary district model.
Okay. And then if you're a resident here, how does this appear? How would this affect a resident? Like what, in terms of the bills they might get or what they're seeing? I'm really trying to understand from a person in the community, what would be different?
There wouldn't be any change. The only difference would be they would be coming before you as the governing board of each of those districts.
And then another question for you, the process, so we have the item before us, and what would happen next?
What would happen next is we would complete the application, which I actually have already reviewed with Executive Director Christine Crawford, to make sure that we weren't having to do any duplicate analysis for that. So we covered that. It's a pretty straightforward application, and we have all the components gathered as a part of this analysis. And so from there, then they would receive that application, and they would conduct a review, do public notice, and then conduct a hearing on it.
And that would be within 3 months, 2 months? I just am not familiar with this process.
They have not conducted one of these. This is not very common. So they were reluctant to give a time frame on it, but they kind of somewhat estimated maybe, 6 months.
Okay. Okay, it's my first set of questions, but I may have more.
Okay.
All right. Others? Any other further questions? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Obviously, a lot of input tonight. Thanks for everybody for coming out and providing input, and I appreciate the passion that people have. And I just speak frankly, it's just I have the same passion around public safety and flood control and those things here. And it's important that we start at a place of common thinking, that places where we can agree that those things are important. I could speak for this council and others in this process. I understand this is a 100-year-old institution, lots of history, and they have done a good job. I don't think operationally, no one's really questioning that. I'm not. I've seen them at work. I've seen them turn on the new pumps in Southport and work the way through it. So the suggestion of otherwise, I think, should be reconsidered. I understand we disagree on what's being considered here, and that's fine. But in my mind, a solution to this that doesn't result in as good or better protection of our city from potential flood, either through drainage or through a levee protection, is top of my mind. I would also, so there are a lot of questions I have and a lot of directions I have, because there is a certain amount of, it's kind of broken up into two issues in my mind. One's around an operational and kind of the financial mechanisms, but it is around the governance piece, which is separate in my mind from actual kind of management of the reclamation districts. And in terms of understanding the policies and the concerns of understanding the requirements of what you require on levee protection and flood, because there are a lot. either from the feds, the Reclamation, Bureau of Reclamation, Army Corps, to the state, which actually used probably, and I know the Ramos brothers will not, is probably the biggest standard bearer, I guess, or controlling factor we have in our levies. So there's a lot to consider at a policy level that goes on, and it has gotten more complicated, which is why the city has been partnering for years with the reclamation districts and through WSAFCA. Mr. Christoph was a leader in that from our city and represented us on those. So we have cared for it as we, in our role. We have staffed against it. We have contributed to it. And I think from my perspective, the issue of governance just is around which body, which would best reflect the concerns and needs of our community and balance it with the real needs of getting flood protection cared for day to day. And there are a few different things. But let me go step back to the operational, because Ms. Sandine brought up some of the core issues for me, which was around, in my mind, the reclamation district, the operations of it don't change. It would be, and I said at the beginning of this, I'm approaching this to a degree from as an acquisition or kind of how do we manage this operationally, and we don't. And I don't want to. I think the lessons we've learned and how we've managed the port are an example of that. The city council members that serve as I do as a port commissioner oversee policies and oversee direction that the port is going, and is able to balance those needs against what we know has to happen with the port to keep it sustainable. And the lessons I've learned from that is, for some time, and this is no offense to anybody on staff, because I know Rick Toff's sitting there, and he does a terrific job every day working as a port director and working with, but we were smart enough to figure out that we're not a maritime company. It took us some time to figure that out. And we were able to get SSA involved and lease back sort of the operational piece of the port to a company who knew what they were doing. So to me, in my mind, the Reclamation District's operational team that has been, I think I talked to Sheila, I'm sorry. I talked to you yesterday, I appreciate you reaching out to me. You're very complimentary of Reclamation District staff that come out, patrol. You got an issue of motorcyclists. I won't call them a bad name, but that are not wise to motorcycle up and down levees. It bothers you guys, but it also could degrade the levee system. So our police, have important crime. Anything you brought up, police don't come. Well, police are worried about major crimes, but the recommendation does come out. And so, and that's what I like to hear, the services there. I think the recommendation district would also agree, and the board members that are here, that we help on their day-to-day operations. They call us, we need the help patrolling of levees, we help on other ways to address areas of concern around ditches or whatever we need to do. Our city staff has, to my understanding, has stepped up and helped, and I'm not sure that would change. We would still be asked to help. So operationally, again, I kind of look at it as we have an operation in place that manages the things we need to, from keeping the levees safe and keeping the levees and the ditches cleared. Those are important things. They know the policies they know who the masters are of each of those levees, be it the Army Corps or the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, who can be stringent on what we can and can't do. Those are very real constraints, I think, or standards. But we do the job to keep them maintained. So from my perspective, operationally, I think if anything in the analysis, it may have, where it may have felt short, it didn't really articulate the contribution that the city currently plays in our flood protection areas, because we don't bill that out. We don't, and am I correct in that? We don't, if we're asked to firefighters conduct some review or pass by levees to patrol them, which we get asked, correct? We don't bill back out to.
Yeah, we're not billing back out. There are a number of areas where the city lends support. For sure, when there is a high water event, like in 95, 1997, 2007, 2010, it was all hands on deck. If
Right.
they needed a piece of equipment that we had that could help, we shared it, no billing back.
Right.
You know, we helped supplement levee patrols. We helped sandbagging. These are some of the things that I got from our Public Works operations staff over the years. And then parks, for example, areas where it was either owned in fee title by, say, one of the reclamation districts, predominantly RD 900, and/or they have an easement, where we have put in a city improvement or a trail, we've typically taken over the maintenance of that. And some examples are Riverwalk Park. So Riverwalk Park, the Parks and Recreation maintains the park area. RD 900 only maintains from basically the water, just right at the edge of the water. But all the other area, had we not built that park, RD 900 would be maintaining everything from the top of the walk down. The MC10 basin over by Nugget Market, the Reclamation District 900 only maintains the slopes to the water. The city maintains the rest all around. Sycamore Trail, another example, when the Lower Northwest Interceptor went in, it was originally an RD 900 area to maintain. Now that the trail is there, the city's taking that over and paying for that. And so we, annually, the city on some of these things, and the homeless cleanups, the camps along the river, that's all city parks and police. We come in and do that cleanup, typically at the request of RD 900, and that's being all paid for out of Measure E. And so the annual cost of the city parks estimated about $80,000 to $100,000 a year is what the city is paying to maintain some of those areas and assist the RD.
And that doesn't include, and I think that's where I want to make sure that there's an understanding, a baseline understanding of what we provide today. And what we've seen is some of the fiscal year budgets from both 900 and 537, which talks about expenditures that they make. And then the analysis kind of looked at if there was a change where you might, a merger between 537 and 900, what that financial impact was. But the broader issue for me is, so the total cost to residents around flood protection and levee protection and maintenance, because it is a combined, in my mind, I'm a taxpayer, and Mr. Ramos, both are board members, Mr. Hinkle's a board member. Like, I'm a tax-paying citizen just like everybody else to their board, want to make sure those dollars are spent right. And in addition, I know I'm paying tax dollars into this city, and I want to make sure that whatever support that we have, continues, because obviously it takes the village to kind of maintain those zones. But we account for that as well. Not that I want to charge them, it's just the realistic picture is that we are contributing to this, and we need to get kind of real about that. It does take, there is collaboration going on. Is it at its peak? Well, obviously not tonight, but there is an offer, talk about more collaboration, and I just don't want it to be perceived that the city or anybody else hasn't been collaborating in this effort already. So, and we need to, and part of the analysis is we should be accounting for that, because that would continue as well, and that's a built-in cost. I also want to take on the issue that came up, and I know folks have brought up at a policy level where governance matters, at least to me, in that it was brought up today and I've seen it in some of the staff reports, and that yes, it is a single district, single focus district, and its concerns around maintenance and protection from flood, and that's absolutely true as it is for us. But there's also in policy, or at least by the Central Valley Board's measure, that we do need to be considering multi-use functionality for these levees going forward. That's not something we made up or we're asking for. We are, as a city, those are things we are asking for because our community is asking for them. And in our park survey, which I pulled out this week, reminded me this, the community is talking, saying in our park survey from this year, is that, I think it was when it's overwhelmingly what the survey they put out to residents and part of the parks plan. Trails are things they want. Now, we wouldn't do that at the risk of any flood protection or any levee impairment, but when the Central Valley Board is also saying that we need to consider those multi-uses on those as a barometer, and I kind of reviewed their plan document their update from 2017, it's very clear that that's something they look for. Those are policy issues that I'd asked the current board to be thinking about as we get those requests, right? That those are things the community has said it wants. We have listened to the community in that way. The community has asked us to continue to pursue trails through the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail, through passes of Measure E overwhelmingly, which we said would go towards trails. So that's where the governance we're maybe not connecting, and I'm hoping that the board members understand it, because the way I understand it is that as the Central Valley Board is asking for those to help with maintenance and also to help forward-looking on how you're going to get funding for future, because it's going to get, again, we're never done with levees like you are with the bridge. You constantly have to paint them and manage them, and while assessments to our community, from our community on parcel taxes are the main way they maintain them, for the big projects like we're working on today, and for the maintenance of those, we're counting on grant money from the federal and state areas. And so if their criteria is, and their plan update says, multi-use, make use of those best you can, then we should probably be listening to that as well. So in my mind, that's the policy area where the governance needs to be really evaluated. That's why I'm even entertaining this. Trust me, I don't need another meeting to go to. I'm on enough boards of meetings with the current role we have. But that's what the policy point of governance it needs to consider. So, because it's just not us saying it, it's the state folks that manage levies that are saying it. And so we need to be attuned to that, and I think that's one of the areas that I want to make sure, at least I'm concerned about, because while I would put our flood protection, our maintenance up against anybody currently, and everyone's doing a great job, it's 10 years, 20 years down the line, it's making sure we have funding for improvements, they meet those needs, we have opportunities to grant funding to make further improvements. We're going to need that. I don't, honestly, I appreciate, Sheila, your comments about single focus districts, but I think in our history as a city, that's evolved too, because I think we've had that's one of the reasons we incorporated 37 years ago. That's the 31, thank you. I'm losing my mind here. But because we have, yeah, no. But we had water districts that were here, we had parks districts, and we've absorbed those, and we now have, I think some of the water being the one is a water quality that's really, I don't see as comparable to anybody in the region. And then again, that's in large part to us saying, as a city, we want to have control of our own destiny, and we've managed to do that very well and maintain our water quality to the point that we have several food vendors or food manufacturers that have moved to town for that exact reason. So, and again, on the financing and kind of the financial part, because Again, I made it clear, I don't think that we should, as a city, really manage ourselves into a box where, you know, thinking that we're going to be able to take on levee protection or maintenance, because there is expertise there, and why would you take that out? That makes no sense if we were to take this governance point. But on the financial side, yeah, we have to protect that money, because the assessment and the taxpayers, and legally, I don't think we can, has to stay there and be only used for flood protection and for them. What I'm a little more concerned about is making sure that there's, we're only talking about moving money one way from a potential money, a city grabbing the money from a district. I would be concerned more about more than we're giving, which is one accounting of how much we spend towards flood protection, but also, you know, any potential money that we would be forwarding on to the district. I mean, that was one of the lessons of the port, right, is we floated the port for an early part of the years and had to give them loans, and I think the districts are in better financial shape. I read the audits. They're strong balance sheets. There's not all expense there. There is, you know, and they save it there, all the assessment. So I don't think we have that problem. I don't think there's any debts there. But again, that's what I worry about, is making sure that it's protecting funds one way, it's also protecting funds the other way, so that the general fund isn't at risk for any operational needs that we don't foresee. I don't know how we manage that. Somebody brought up, I don't forget who, I'm sorry, brought up insurance. I don't know how that would work. I would hope going forward we analyze this, that again, I hadn't thought of that, to be honest with you. But those are things we need to get our arms around before we give it. But again, that's the sort of the nature of that. So again, I know I've taken a lot of time. I apologize, Mr. Mayor, but this is a very complex process and issue, and at the core of it for me is just around the city's ability to manage, not necessarily manage the districts, but first I think we can agree 437 and 900, having two in the city doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the way it's broken up. And having it totally within the boundaries of the city makes sense. But I want to make sure that the governance of this board, and this is no disrespect to those, because we're getting it tonight too, about our ability to manage it. It's just a matter of the community has priorities as well, and how do we manage it so that those are met. And it isn't about the operations of the team, it's more about that for me. So I'll stop there, and but I appreciate everyone's feedback. I was listening, taking notes, and appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can you describe the nature of our insurance and our insurance pool and YC Parmea? Maybe I'm looking at the wrong member of the staff, but this notion that we're wholly self-insured, I think, is some background would be useful.
I'm probably going to stumble over this, so that's why I'm looking over at the finance folks. But the city is a member of YC Parmea, the Yolo County Public Agency Mutual Risk Management Authority. So it is not self-insured. It is a pooled insurance. It is true that the RDs have some limited insurance, but my understanding, and I haven't spent a lot of time on this, is it is extremely limited. So it is not insurance that would cover and protect the RDs from claims for any significant levee breach or any other activity.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, maybe another quick question, Charlene. Is there any argument that if we go with the proposed staff recommendation that we'll be safer, we'll be better protected? Because in the conversation, I haven't really heard that that's really the issue. It's more a structural issue, possibly a financial issue, and public access issue. But I didn't really see that changing, the organizational structure really affects the safety one way or another.
Yeah, it would be probably slight, and where it would come from would be through better coordination, because you'd only have the one governing board overseeing both districts. And so that's where I believe there could be some benefits to safety.
And that could be mitigated if there's better coordination, if there are two organizations, for example, I would imagine.
That's another way too.
Right. Yeah, I think there's real issues, I think, with the way RD 900 and 537 are now, and because I think over the years, people in our community really view drainage canals and the retention basins as, visual amenities and ponds. And so there is this perception by folks that are diametrically opposed to really the function of those facilities as part of flood protection. And I think just the way RD 900 or some of the folks in RD 900 have reacted with some of the community members has been a problem. Because of that conflict, I think RD 900 and RD rightfully knows that their job is to protect the drainage and protect the levees. And that could conflict with folks that want to use the levees for purposes that I think we all want to see people use. So there are issues there. So regardless of the outcome here, I think that has got to change. But, I think we really didn't get into the liability issue very much. But that's really kind of what I'm focused on. And I understand, the analysis that if there are two separate boards, we have a shield of liability. But, I know, just in the area of corporations and piercing a corporate veil, it's a slip of something that really collapses that down into one organization. It could be, in this case, maybe a possible use of city facilities, possible use of indirect funding between the sources, possible use of city staff. There could be all kinds of ways. And I think, even though in the end we may not be liable, if there is a catastrophic event, we know there's going to be a lot of those dang attorneys out there that are going to pile on, and they're going to be looking at ways to create liability with the city, and the city's going to be named in a lawsuit. And the city could get out at some point, maybe with a nuisance value, but the more evidence they have going through books and records and meetings of agendas and getting deeper in the details, it generates more of a case, and more of a case means more money. So in terms of settlement, if we wanted to do that. So we've seen that before in some of the cases that have come before us that, it just gets to the point where we have the cost of litigation. Just, look, it's not 100% you're going to win at trial. So, you always have to make those kind of decisions. So there is, even though they're technically at the end, it may not be 100% liable, I think there is going to be a definite cost the closer we get to operating these things. And that's a real problem with me. And so we really need a good reason, I think, to go in that direction. And just through the conversations that we've had, I don't see that there's been maybe a good analysis of possible ways around this. So short of an organizational change, as I mentioned, maybe something along just consolidation sounds like it's a good idea of RD 900 and 537, because they are two separate groups, and it does create a communication issue. And, I understand that 537 really doesn't have many people there, but still, it seems like there would be some benefit to having common organization dealing with the levies. And, I'd really like to see if the amenities really are treated as part of the city, and the city really can take those over. I see a lot less exposure in the cities taking over drainage than taking over the levees. And I wouldn't have a problem if the city were to do that. Just take over the internal drainage issues and deal with that in terms of the public amenities and do what we need to do for our residents and our own internal flood protection. But the levees themselves, I think it's a real problem. And it's the liability issue. And we don't have any expertise on that. And if there's no safety issue in doing it, the question is why.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Roscoe?
I've read and reread the staff report and the LAFCO reports twice over, maybe more. And, the questions that I've had since the first and second reading, and a lot of them have been satisfied by the staff responses and a lot of the answers I've heard. However, with respect, the only thing that is outstanding to me is the issue that Councilmember Johannesson brought up, and Well, I mean, I've heard from the community, members of this community, and I do respect that you're staying up here really late and really passionately communicating with us your concerns. I mean, we're all residents here in West Sacramento, too. We don't want to drown in a flood. I mean, this is a common concern for all of us. Just because we happen to be sitting on a dais making a decision doesn't make us immune to all of our common concerns, which, we all want the same thing, I believe. And in this case, I'm satisfied that the RD funds would be used in furtherance for RD obligations. This is not a situation where we're going to be using RD funds for pet projects. And I've heard, anything from, just, I don't want to rely on conjecture. I want to rely on facts. And so when it comes down to the main issue for me, it's what is our exposure to liability? Because I did hear one of my concerns expressed this evening. What's the exposure for our general fund and, people's retirements down the road? And is this something that we should very seriously consider? And of course it is. Do we have enough information to make that determination today? I don't know. I mean, I'm satisfied based on the information that has been provided to me that our city would be shielded, that we wouldn't incur liabilities simply based on the fact that we would have a governance structure that would include RD. However, in the one thing that I stick on is on page 4, which is, would the city expose itself to increased inverse condemnation liability if a levy failure were to occur, putting the general fund at
Ms.
risk?
Orozco?
Yes.
May I suggest that it might not be the best idea to read from a
I apologize.
attorney-client privileged memo?
It's, sorry, it's page 3. It's many of the issues raised in this, the LAFCO February 18 memo. It's in line 2, where it says, a reorganization resulting in subsidiary districts should not lead to increased liability for the city. And I almost wanted an absolute, not just a shouldn't or probably. It sounded a little conditional. So maybe that's just a question for staff. Is there some, how can I be better educated to know what it is that what actions that the city would engage in that would further expose ourselves to liability, and where do we draw that line?
Again, with all due respect, I would prefer not to have this conversation in a public meeting. I would be happy to elaborate in more detail, and if you would like to have a closed session under exposure to litigation, we could probably do that, but I'm not comfortable speaking in a public meeting.
I understand.
Can we recess to a closed session for these questions to be answered, or do you want a sidebar? Or?
You do have a placekeeper for exposure to litigation. We could use that if you would like to do that.
Okay. All right. Then let's take a brief recess of the open session and convene in closed session for the purpose of conferring with the city attorney regarding the exposure to litigation. And I am going to commit that we will be back in no later than 10 minutes. All right, we're going to reconvene in open session. And do we need a report out, Mr. City Attorney? Or
No, the council
Since we're
met
in the
in
middle of
closed
the
session
item.
under significant exposure litigation. No action was taken.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're now back, the item is back before us. Is there further questions or comments? Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you for your patience. As I mentioned, and it's late, so I'm really tired, but I had an opportunity to consult with our council, and I feel that the information provided has clarified a lot of the issues that I previously had. I just want to commend the RDs and the representatives for coming forth and sharing their comments and suggestions, as well as for the many years you've committed to serving our community. This is obviously a complicated issue with good arguments on both sides, and so it's not an easy decision for us tonight, but I'm listening to all the comments and appreciate your coming forth to talk to our council.
Thank you. All right, are there further, did you have another round of questions or comments?
I think there were many of the comments and questions I had were also asked. Thanks.
All right, so is there any further discussion? Is there a motion? Action? Sandy?
Sorry. I'll move the item.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? You're done. Oh, sorry, Mr. Johansson, that motion. Madam Clerk, I think, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Sandin? Aye. Councilmember Orozco?
Aye.
Councilmember Johansson?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma? Aye. Mayor Cabaldon?
Aye.
Thank you.
So that motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for the extensive discussion and for the deep consideration of the issue. All right, council calendar. Ms. Berlin?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Coming up this weekend on Saturday, Fire Station 44 is having an open house, and that starts at 11 a.m.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City manager report?
Just briefly, we're getting good news on flood funding from the Army Corps, and we're hoping to get some announcement by the end of the week in
The work
terms of the
plan?
work program.
Okay, great.
And we should be able to get that to you by the end of the week.
All right, excellent. Questions for the city manager report? City attorney report?
Nothing to report.
Staff direction from members of the council? We have no future agenda item requests, so Ms. Sandine moves, and Mr. Johansson seconds that the meeting be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.